The throne room smelled of expensive perfume and barely concealed desperation. Alara pressed herself against the marble pillar, trying to become invisible, a skill she'd perfected over 23 years of existing in spaces where she didn't belong. Her feet screamed in protest, blisters rubbing raw against the thin fabric of her worn shoes. She'd been standing for 6 hours straight, refilling crystal goblets and removing half-eaten delicacies from silver platters while the elite families of the Silvercrest territory paraded their daughters like prized livestock. The Luna selection ceremony, the event of the century, the moment every highborn she-wolf had been preparing for since birth. And Alara was just the help. She watched another candidate glide past, her silk gown probably worth more than Alara would earn in 5 years of servitude. The girl's mother fussed with her hair, whispering last-minute reminders about posture and poise. Alara felt something twist in her chest, not quite jealousy, more like the ache of witnessing a world she'd never be part of. A world with mothers who cared. A world where you mattered. Stop it, she told herself. You're here to work, not to dream. But God, her feet hurt. The ceremony had been going on since dawn, and the sun was now bleeding orange through the stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across the polished floor. Alara shifted her weight, wincing as her heel caught on a fresh blister. The head servant, Mistress Carolyn, had made it crystal clear. Stand straight, stay alert, don't draw attention. But Mistress Carolyn was nowhere in sight right now, probably in the kitchen supervising the preparation of the evening feast. Alara's gaze drifted to the center of the room, where it sat, the sacred Luna throne. Even empty, it commanded attention. Carved from some ancient white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The throne rose from the dais like a frozen wave. Intricate symbols covered every inch of its surface. Moon phases, howling wolves, geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long. The seat itself was draped in silver fabric that shimmered like liquid mercury. According to legend, the throne had been blessed by the moon goddess herself 300 years ago. It would recognize the true Luna, the woman destined to lead their people into a new era of prosperity and power. When the rightful Luna sat upon it, the throne would glow with celestial light, binding her to the territory and marking her as chosen. It hadn't glowed in 3 centuries. Hundreds of candidates had tried over the generations. Alpha's daughters, priestesses, women of impeccable bloodlines with family trees that stretched back to the first shifters. The throne had remained stubbornly dark for all of them. Most wolves had started to think it was just a beautiful chair with a good story attached. But tradition was tradition, and so here they were, another generation of hopeful families. Another ceremony destined to end in disappointment and political maneuvering. The Alpha would probably just choose someone based on alliances and strategy, like always. The throne was window dressing. Alara's feet throbbed with renewed intensity. A sharp pain shot up her left leg. That blister had definitely burst. She bit her lip to keep from gasping. Around her, the crowd's attention focused on the current candidate, a stunning blonde who was giving a speech about honor and duty. Everyone's eyes were forward, just for a minute. Just to take the weight off. Alara glanced around one more time, confirming that nobody was watching the servant girl in the shadows. The throne sat there on its dais, abandoned for the moment, while the candidates went through their presentations on the floor below. It was just a chair, after all. Just stone and fabric. She wouldn't hurt anything by sitting for 60 seconds while she let her feet recover. The pain decided for her. Moving quickly, quietly the way she'd learned to move through life. Alara slipped from behind her pillar and climbed the 3 steps to the dais. Up close, the throne was even more magnificent. The stone felt cool under her fingertips as she steadied herself. The silver fabric looked softer than anything she'd ever touched. She turned and lowered herself onto the seat, the relief immediate and overwhelming. Her feet dangled slightly. The throne had been built for someone taller, more regal. Alara let out a quiet sigh, closing her eyes for just a moment, savoring the absence of pain. The stone beneath her began to warm. Alara's eyes snapped open. That was strange. The throne had felt cold just seconds ago, but now heat was spreading through the stone, up through the fabric, into her body. Not burning more like the warmth of sunlight on skin, but from the inside out. Then the light started. It began as a flicker, like a candle being lit in darkness. Silver luminescence bloomed beneath her, radiating out from where her body touched the throne. The carved symbols on the armrests flared to life, glowing with ethereal light. The entire chair began to pulse with energy, waves of silver-blue radiance expanding outward across the dais. "Oh no," Alara whispered. "No, no, no." She tried to stand. Her body wouldn't obey. It wasn't that the throne was holding her down. She could move her arms, turn her head, but her core, the connection between her body and the seat, felt fused, welded, like the throne had become part of her skeleton. The light grew brighter. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Alara heard footsteps, shouts, the rustle of hundreds of bodies turning to face the dais. Her face burned with horror and shame as she realized what she'd done. She'd sat on the sacred Luna throne. She'd touched something forbidden, and now it was glowing beneath her like she'd set it on fire. "It's glowing!" someone screamed. "The throne is glowing. After 300 years. Who is that? Is that a servant?" Alara wanted to die. She wanted the marble floor to crack open and swallow her whole. She pushed against the armrests, trying desperately to stand, but the throne held her fast. The light pulsed brighter with each beat of her racing heart, as if feeding on her panic. The blonde candidate who'd been speaking stood frozen mid-gesture, her mouth hanging open. Her mother looked like she might faint. All around the throne room, faces turned upward, some shocked, some awed, many twisted with anger and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" The voice cracked like thunder through the hall. Elder Rothschild, head of the council, pushed through the crowd, his face purple with rage. He was a massive man, built like a bull, with silver hair and cold eyes that had never once looked at Alara with anything resembling kindness. "You!" He jabbed a finger at her. "Get off the throne immediately." "I'm trying." Alara's voice came out high and panicked. "I can't, it won't let me. She's contaminated it." A woman shrieked from the crowd. "Lady Ashford, mother of one of the candidates. Her filthy peasant hands have defiled the sacred seat. Remove her at once." Another voice demanded. "This is blasphemy. The ceremony is ruined." Elder Rothschild stormed up the dais steps, his face a mask of fury. He reached for Alara's arm, clearly intending to yank her off the throne by force. His fingers closed around her wrist. The throne erupted. A wave of pure silver energy exploded outward, catching Elder Rothschild square in the chest and sending him flying backward. He crashed into the crowd, taking down 3 other people with him. The light around Alara intensified, forming a barrier, a shield of crackling luminescence that surrounded the throne and made it clear: touch her and face the consequences. The throne room descended into chaos. Women screamed. Men shouted. The candidates who'd spent their whole lives preparing for this moment stared at the glowing throne with expressions of devastation and fury. Because it wasn't glowing for them. It was glowing for the orphan girl in the stained uniform, the nobody with no name and no family, the servant who'd only sat down because her feet hurt. "This can't be happening," Alara whispered. But the light didn't care about her disbelief. It pulsed and swirled around her like a living thing, beautiful and terrible and absolutely undeniable. The massive oak doors at the far end of the throne room slammed open. The crowd parted immediately, bodies moving aside like water as he entered. Alara had never seen him up close before. Alpha Kirin was a figure glimpsed from distances, a name spoken in reverent whispers, a presence felt rather than known. But now he was striding toward the dais, and even in her state of panic, Alara couldn't help but stare. He moved like violence contained in flesh, every step deliberate, powerful, threatening, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes the color of winter storms. His face could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and hard lines, but there was something in his gaze as he looked at her. Not anger, not confusion, calculation. He stopped at the base of the dais, studying her with unsettling intensity. The protective light from the throne flickered slightly, as if uncertain how to respond to him. Around them, the crowd held its collective breath. "What's your name?" His voice was deep, controlled, but with an undercurrent that suggested he was very good at hiding what he was really thinking. "Alara." Her tongue felt thick in her mouth. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. My feet hurt, and I just needed to sit down for a minute, and I didn't think." "Your family name." The shame hit her like a physical blow. "I don't have one. I'm from the servants' quarters. I was found as a baby. No pack, no family. I'm nobody. Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to read. He turned to address the crowd without taking his eyes off her. Everyone out. Alpha Kieran, you can't possibly. Elder Rothschild had regained his feet, still looking furious. This girl has defiled the sacred, I said out. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kieran's alpha command rolled through the space like thunder, and even Alara, who wasn't a proper shifter, who'd never successfully transformed, felt the weight of it pressing against her chest. Now, the crowd moved as one, a tide of silk and anger flowing toward the exits. But Alara saw their faces as they went, saw the hatred in Lady Ashford's eyes, saw the calculating gleam in Elder Rothschild's expression, saw the tears on the faces of girls who'd been promised this moment since birth. She'd made enemies, powerful ones, all because she'd needed to rest her feet. When the last person filed out and the doors closed with a heavy thud, the silence felt suffocating. Kieran climbed the dais steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. The throne's protective barrier rippled but didn't lash out at him. He stopped just outside the sphere of light, close enough that Alara could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. Hold out your hand, he said. What? Your hand. Give it to me. Trembling, Alara extended her right hand. It looked so small and rough compared to everything around her, nails bitten short, skin marked with burns from kitchen work, a permanent stain of silver polish on her index finger. The hand of someone who served, not someone who ruled. Kieran reached through the barrier of light. It parted for him like mist. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle, and the moment they touched, the light changed. It stopped pulsing frantically and settled into a steady, bright glow. The silver luminescence expanded to encompass both of them, wrapping around their joined hands like ribbon. The throne hummed beneath Alara, a sound she felt more than heard, like the purr of some massive, ancient creature recognizing its master. Or rather, recognizing them both. Kieran stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up at her, Alara saw something in his eyes that made her stomach flip, not quite anger, not quite interest, something in between. The throne doesn't make mistakes, he said quietly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in what might have been an unconscious gesture. 300 years, it's rejected everyone. Noble bloodlines, powerful shifters, women raised from birth to sit here. All of them failed. I didn't mean to. I know. He cut her off, but not unkindly. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're here, the throne has claimed you, and you've just made a lot of very dangerous enemies. Can't you just tell them it was a mistake? That I touched something I shouldn't have? A bitter smile crossed his face. And say what? That the sacred throne, blessed by the moon goddess herself, glowed for 6 hours straight for a mistake? That it attacked a council elder to protect an error? He shook his head. The throne's judgment is absolute. If I tried to claim this was wrong, I'd be calling our most sacred relic a liar. Alara's chest tightened. So what happens now? Kieran was quiet for a long moment, still holding her hand, still studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Finally, he spoke, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Now, we figure out why the throne chose a servant girl with no pack, no power, and no training. And we keep you alive long enough to find the answer. He released her hand and stepped back. The protective barrier of light flickered but held. Alara felt the throne's grip on her loosen slightly. She could probably stand now if she tried. But something told her that standing would change everything, would make this real in a way it wasn't quite yet. Guards will escort you to the Luna chambers, Kieran continued, his voice returning to its formal, commanding tone. For your protection. Protection? Alara heard the fear in her own voice. Or imprisonment. That bitter smile returned. In this palace, they're often the same thing. He turned and descended the dais, moving toward the doors. Alara found her voice just before he reached them. Alpha Kieran. He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Do you think the throne made a mistake? For a long moment, he just looked at her, this small, scared girl in servant's clothes, sitting on a throne that was supposed to save their people, wrapped in light that shouldn't exist. When he finally answered, his voice carried a weight she didn't understand. I think the throne sees something the rest of us can't. And that terrifies them more than any mistake ever could. Then he was gone. and Alara was alone with the glowing throne, and the certainty that her life, her small, invisible, carefully protected life was over. The light pulsed beneath her, steady as a heartbeat. And somewhere deep in her chest, in a place she didn't know existed, something answered. Chapter 2. The throne rejects all others. The Luna chambers were a gilded cage. Alara had been escorted, dragged, really through marble corridors by 4 stone-faced guards who wouldn't meet her eyes. They'd deposited her in a suite of rooms so lavish she'd initially thought they'd brought her to the wrong place. Silk curtains the color of moonlight. A bed large enough to sleep 6 people. Windows that overlooked gardens she'd only ever seen while carrying laundry baskets. A bathroom with a tub carved from a single piece of white marble. It was the most beautiful prison she'd ever seen. That had been 3 hours ago. Since then, she'd heard raised voices beyond her door. Arguments, accusations, demands. The guards had changed shifts twice, but they remained posted outside, ensuring she couldn't leave. Not that she knew where she'd go. Back to the servants' quarters? After what happened? They'd probably burn her cot just to erase the contamination. Alara sat on the edge of the massive bed, still wearing her stained uniform, and tried to understand how her life had imploded in less than a day. The door burst open without warning. Lady Ashford swept in like a storm, her silk gown rustling with fury. Behind her came 3 other women Alara recognized from the ceremony mothers of candidates, all of them dripping with wealth and barely contained rage. The guards made no move to stop them. Of course not. These were high-born ladies. And Alara was just… what? A mistake? A joke? A fraud? You have some nerve, Lady Ashford hissed, her perfectly painted lips curling into a sneer. Sitting there on that bed like you belong in this room. Like you belong anywhere near that throne. Alara stood automatically, a servant's instinct to show respect to her betters. The movement seemed to enrage Lady Ashford further. Don't you dare stand in my presence like we're equals. You're a servant. A foundling. You have no bloodline, no breeding. No right to even breathe the same air as true she-wolves. I didn't mean to. Alara started, but one of the other women cut her off. Didn't mean to? Lady Pemberton laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. You didn't mean to sit on the most sacred relic in our territory? You didn't mean to ruin the Luna selection that our daughters have prepared for their entire lives? My daughter has studied politics, diplomacy, and pack law since she was 5 years old. Another woman added, her voice shaking with emotion. She can recite the entire lineage of the moon blessed back 10 generations. She's trained in combat, in strategy, in everything a Luna needs to know. And you probably can't even read. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Alara could read, but poorly. Servants weren't exactly given extensive education. She'd taught herself what she could from discarded papers and overheard lessons. But it wasn't the same as real schooling. The throne made a mistake, Lady Ashford declared, moving closer. Alara fought the urge to step back. Or more likely you used some kind of dark magic. Witchcraft. A spell purchased from one of those shadow dealers in the lower territories. I don't know any magic, Alara whispered. I can't even shift properly. I'm probably the least magical person in this entire territory. Lies, Lady Pemberton spat. The throne doesn't glow for powerless nobodies. You did something. And when the council discovers what, they'll have you executed for treason against the moon goddess herself. They circled her like predators. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. These women couldn't hurt her physically, not here, not with guards outside, but their words cut deep into wounds that had never fully healed. Every insecurity, every moment of feeling worthless, every time she'd been told she didn't matter, it all came flooding back. When my daughter sits on that throne tomorrow, Lady Ashford said, her voice dropping to something almost conversational. And when it glows for her as it should have today, we'll all know the truth. That you're nothing. A glitch. An embarrassment. Tomorrow? Alara's voice cracked. Oh, didn't they tell you? Lady Ashford's smile was poisonous. The council has decreed an emergency session. Every eligible candidate will attempt the throne again. In the proper order. With proper ceremony. Whatever dark influence you placed on it will be cleansed by dawn, and the true Luna will be revealed. The other women nodded, their expressions triumphant. They swept toward the door like they'd accomplished what they came for, putting the servant girl back in her place. Lady Ashford paused at the threshold, looking back with cold satisfaction. "Enjoy your one night in these chambers, girl. By tomorrow evening, you'll be back where you belong. If you're lucky, they'll let you keep your job in the kitchens. If you're not," she smiled, "well, blasphemy is still a capital offense in the old laws." The door closed behind them, and Alara finally let herself collapse onto the bed. Her whole body shook. They were going to do it again. The ceremony. The candidates. And this time, the throne would recognize someone else, someone worthy, and Alara would be revealed as the fraud she knew she was. She should have felt relieved. This nightmare would end. She could go back to being invisible. But something in her chest ached at the thought of never seeing that silver light again. Of never feeling the throne's warmth beneath her. That sense of belonging to something greater than herself. For 6 hours, she'd been important. For 6 hours, she'd mattered. Tomorrow, she'd be nobody again. If she survived, dawn arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. Alara hadn't slept. She'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, waiting for something she didn't know what. An apology? An explanation? Some sign that this was all a terrible dream? Instead, she got Mistress Carolyn. The head servant entered without knocking, her face carved from disapproval. "Get up," she snapped. "They want you in the throne room." "Mistress Carolyn, I'm so sorry." "Save it." The older woman's voice was ice. 20 years I've been training servants to be invisible, to serve without being seen. And you? You sat on the sacred Luna throne. Do you have any idea what you've done to this household's reputation? The shame you've brought on all of us? Alara's throat burned. Mistress Carolyn had never been warm, but she'd been consistent, fair. The closest thing to a mother figure Alara had ever known. And now even that was gone, replaced by this cold stranger who looked at her with contempt. "Come on," Mistress Carolyn said, turning away. "And for Moon's sake, try to look presentable. You're embarrassing enough without looking like you slept in your clothes." Because she had. Because nobody had brought her anything else to wear. Because she was still just a servant pretending to be something more. The throne room had been transformed overnight. More guards lined the walls, serious men in formal armor who looked like they expected a fight. The council sat in a semicircle of ornate chairs, their faces grave and judgmental, and in the center, on its dais, sat the throne. It wasn't glowing. In the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows, it looked exactly like it had before Alara touched it, beautiful, ancient, and completely dormant. Just an elaborate chair with good stories attached. The candidates and their families filled the space, all of them dressed in their finest. Alara caught sight of Lady Ashford's daughter, Vivienne, a stunning blonde with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of being told you were special. She stood near the front, her chin high, looking at the throne like it was already hers. "Bring her forward," Elder Rothschild commanded from his council chair. The guards prodded Alara toward the dais. She walked the length of the throne room, feeling hundreds of eyes burning into her skin. Whispers followed her like smoke. "Servant. Fraud. Nobody." The words wrapped around her throat, making it hard to breathe. She stopped at the base of the dais, keeping her eyes down. Proper servant posture. Don't make eye contact. Don't draw attention. All the rules she'd broken yesterday screamed through her mind. "The council has convened this emergency session," Elder Rothschild announced, his voice carrying through the chamber, "to rectify yesterday's irregularity. The sacred Luna throne will be tested again, properly, under controlled conditions. Each candidate will attempt the throne in order of bloodline purity." Bloodline purity. Alara had none. She was the opposite of pure bloodline. She was question marks and blank spaces, a baby found in the woods with no pack scent and no family marking. "Should the throne accept any candidate," Elder Rothschild continued, "that woman will be recognized as our Luna, and yesterday's incident will be forgotten as a temporary magical anomaly." However, his eyes fixed on Alara, with undisguised hatred. "Should the throne remain dark for all candidates, the girl will be charged with magical interference and face trial for blasphemy. A death sentence." He was talking about a death sentence. Vivienne Ashford, Elder Rothschild called. As daughter of the Ashford line, descended from the original Moon-blessed, You will go first." Vivienne stepped forward with practiced grace. She'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. It showed in every movement, every confident tilt of her head. She climbed the dais steps like she was ascending to her rightful place, turned, and lowered herself onto the throne with perfect posture. The crowd held its breath. The throne remained dark. Vivienne's confidence flickered. She adjusted her position, smoothing her gown, placing her hands precisely on the armrests. Nothing. No glow, no warmth. Just dead stone beneath expensive fabric. "It's still contaminated," Lady Ashford called out desperately. "The girl's dark magic is blocking the throne's true recognition." "Remove yourself, Vivienne," Elder Rothschild said, his tone neutral but his eyes calculating. "Next candidate." One by one, they tried. Daughters of alphas, granddaughters of previous Lunas, women with bloodlines so pure you could trace them back to the first shifters. Each one climbed the dais with hope burning in their eyes. Each one sat on the throne with varying degrees of grace and desperation. Each one faced the same result: darkness, silence, rejection. Some tried multiple times, adjusting their positions, speaking prayers to the moon goddess, touching different parts of the throne. Nothing worked. The throne remained stubbornly, absolutely devastatingly dark. After the seventh rejection, panic rippled through the crowd. These were the best candidates their territory had to offer, the most qualified, most prepared, most deserving. If the throne wouldn't accept them, then what? Were they meant to go without a Luna? Continue with political appointments and empty ceremonies? "This is her doing," someone shouted, pointing at Alara. "She's cursed it. Burn the witch. Make her reverse the spell." The guards moved closer to Alara as the crowd's anger grew. She wanted to protest that she didn't know any spells, that she couldn't even make basic moon water properly, but terror had stolen her voice. "Enough." Alpha Kieran's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He'd been standing in the shadows near the council seats, watching. Now he moved forward, and the crowd instinctively parted for him. He climbed the dais and stood before the throne, his expression unreadable. "Everyone has failed," he said simply. "Every candidate of proper bloodline, proper training, proper breeding, all rejected." His eyes swept the room. "Perhaps the problem isn't the girl. Perhaps it's our assumptions." "Alpha Kieran, surely you're not suggesting," Elder Rothschild began, but Kieran cut him off. "I'm suggesting we test the obvious." He looked down at Alara, and something in his gaze made her stomach flip. "Come here." "No," Lady Ashford shrieked. "You can't let her touch it again." "If she cursed it," Kieran said calmly, "then having her sit should make no difference. The throne will remain dark, and we'll have our proof of magical interference. But if the throne responds..." He left the sentence hanging, dangerous, and full of implication. Alara's legs felt like water as she climbed the dais. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. The throne waited, cold and silent and ordinary. She could feel the weight of expectation crushing down on her shoulders, the hope that she was a fraud, that this would all be revealed as a trick. She sat. The throne exploded with light. Silver radiance burst from the stone like a supernova, flooding the dais and spilling down the steps. The carved symbols blazed to life, glowing so bright that people in the front rows shielded their eyes. The light wrapped around Alara like liquid silk, warm and welcoming and absolutely, undeniably real. The throne room erupted into chaos. "It's glowing again. How is this possible? She must be controlling it somehow." But Alara barely heard them. She was lost in the sensation of the throne's recognition, feeling the warmth spread through her bones, the rightness of this connection. It felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering, like being recognized after years of invisibility, like mattering. Someone rushed the dais, one of the rejected candidates, her face twisted with fury and jealousy. "If I can't have it, neither can you." She lunged for Alara, fingers curved into claws. The throne's protective barrier snapped into existence instantly. A wall of silver fire erupted between Alara and her attacker, sending the woman flying backward. She crashed into the crowd, screaming. Burns marked her hands where she'd touched the barrier. The light intensified, responding to the threat. Alara felt the throne's power thrumming beneath her, vast and ancient and protective. It wasn't just a chair. It was alive in some way she didn't understand. and it had claimed her as surely as she'd accidentally claimed it. "Get her off of it," someone yelled. 3 guards approached the dais, weapons drawn. The barrier flared brighter, warning them back. They hesitated, looking to Elder Rothschild for orders. "Stand down," Kieran commanded, before the elder could speak. His voice carried alpha authority that even the council couldn't override. The guards lowered their weapons. Kieran turned to face the assembled crowd, his expression hard. "The throne has spoken. Twice now. In front of witnesses. Under controlled conditions. It rejects everyone except her. She's a servant," Lady Pemberton shouted. "She has no bloodline, no training, no, what she doesn't have," Kieran interrupted, his voice cutting, "is your approval. But she has the thrones. And according to our most sacred laws, the ones you all claim to respect, the throne's choice is absolute. This violates every tradition." Elder Rothschild rose from his seat, his face purple with rage. "We cannot accept a foundling as our Luna. It would be a mockery of everything we stand for. Then perhaps what we stand for needs examination." Kieran's words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock. 300 years, the throne rejected everyone, every proper candidate, every pure bloodline, every prepared daughter of the elite. Maybe the throne was waiting for something different, someone different. He looked at Alara, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart stutter. Not quite kindness, not quite respect, but possibility. Like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, and trying to decide what she might become. "The council will convene to discuss this matter," Elder Rothschild declared, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Until then, the girl remains in the Luna chambers, under guard. And the throne is not to be touched by anyone." "Agreed," Kieran said. Then, to the guards, "Escort her back, and this time, make sure no one gets past you. She's under my personal protection now." The words sent a ripple through the crowd. Personal protection from an alpha meant something significant, a claim of responsibility, an investment of authority. It meant Kieran was taking a side in this conflict, and that side was hers. Alara rose from the throne on shaking legs. The moment she left the seat, the light faded, returning the throne to its dormant state, but she could still feel the warmth on her skin, the echo of that connection thrumming in her chest. As the guards surrounded her and led her toward the exit, Alara caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Can't possibly accept her. Found in the woods like an animal. My daughter deserved that throne. Dangerous precedent. What if she can't even shift properly?" The last comment hit harder than the others because it was true. Alara had never successfully completed a transformation. She'd felt the pull of the moon, sensed something trying to emerge from inside her, but it never fully manifested. She was broken in the most fundamental way a shifter could be broken, and now they wanted her to be their Luna. As they passed through the doorway, Alara glanced back one last time. The throne sat on its dais, ordinary and silent again, but she could still feel it somehow, a phantom warmth where it had touched her soul. And standing beside it, watching her with those storm-gray eyes, Alpha Kieran looked like a man who'd just made a dangerous bet and wasn't sure if it would pay off or destroy everything. Alara had a sinking feeling that she was that bet, and the odds were not in her favor. Chapter 3. Her worthless past revealed. The Luna chambers felt smaller now. Alara sat curled on the window seat, watching dawn break over the Silvercrest Gardens. She'd been locked in these rooms for 2 days since the second ceremony, 2 days of isolation, broken only by silent guards delivering meals and Mistress Carolyn's cold visits to ensure she hadn't destroyed anything. Expensive. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody explained what was happening. She was a problem they'd locked away while they figured out what to do with her. The shame was crushing. She kept replaying the moment in the throne room, the way Vivienne's face had crumpled when the throne rejected her, the raw hatred in Lady Ashford's eyes, the shocked whispers of servant, and nobody that followed Alara like a curse. These people had trained their entire lives for a destiny that had been stolen by someone who couldn't even shift properly. Alara pressed her forehead against the cool glass, and let herself remember the thing she usually tried to forget. She'd been 12 the first time she'd felt the pull. Full moon night, late summer, the air thick with the scent of pine and wild things. All the young shifters had been brought to the ceremonial grounds for their first transformation, a rite of passage, a celebration of what made them who they were. Alara had been there too, because technically she was the right age, even though everyone whispered that foundlings like her probably couldn't shift at all. She'd felt it though. Something inside her had responded to the moon's call, twisting and pulling beneath her skin. Pain had lanced through her bones as they tried to reshape themselves. Her fingernails had sharpened into claws. Fur had begun to sprout along her arms. But then nothing. The transformation had stalled halfway, leaving her gasping on the ground in agony, caught between human and wolf, belonging to neither. The other children had completed their shifts around her, becoming beautiful wolves with sleek fur and bright eyes, and Alara had remained stuck, broken, wrong. The pack healer had examined her afterward, his expression grave. "There's something blocking her transformation," he'd said, "like a wall inside her that won't come down. I've never seen anything like it." After that, they'd stopped bringing her to the ceremonial grounds. She'd been quietly removed from the lists of young shifters, reassigned permanently to servant duties. Nobody had been cruel about it, they'd simply stopped expecting anything from her. Stopped seeing her as anything more than the orphan girl who served them meals and washed their clothes. She'd learned to be grateful for invisibility. At least when nobody saw you, they couldn't be disappointed. And now? Now the entire territory was staring at her, and all they saw was a fraud sitting on a throne she couldn't possibly deserve. A knock on the door made her jump. Not the casual bang of guards, or Mistress Carolyn's impatient rap. This was different. Polite. Almost hesitant. "Come in," Alara called, her voice rough from disuse. The door opened, and Alpha Kieran entered carrying a covered tray. He was dressed more casually than she'd seen him before, simple dark pants and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with old scars. Without his formal alpha regalia, he looked younger, still dangerous, but more human. "The guards said you haven't eaten today," he said, setting the tray on the small table near the window. Alara stared at him. "You brought me food? Don't you have servants for that?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I do, but they're all terrified of you right now. Apparently, the girl who made the sacred Luna throne glow might curse them if they look at her wrong." He lifted the cover, revealing warm bread, cheese, fruit, and what looked like honey-glazed pastries. "Besides, I wanted to talk to you, privately." Her stomach growled traitorously at the sight of real food, not the cold, basic meals the guards had been bringing. Alara hesitated, then moved to the table. She broke off a piece of bread, expecting him to start interrogating her immediately. Instead, he sat in the chair across from her and said, "Tell me about where you came from." "I don't know where I came from. That's the whole problem. Tell me what you do know." Alara chewed slowly, buying time. Nobody had ever asked her this before, not like they cared about the answer. Usually, when people inquired about her past, it was to confirm their assumptions about her worthlessness. But Kieran waited, patient and attentive, like her story actually mattered. "I was found at the edge of Silvercrest territory," she finally said. 23 years ago, during the worst winter in recorded history. A patrol discovered me abandoned near the northern border, just a baby wrapped in a blanket with no pack scent, no markings, nothing to identify where I came from. She remembered the story because it had been told to her countless times, usually accompanied by pointed comments about how lucky she was that anyone had bothered to take her in. "The patrol brought me back to the main compound. The healers examined me, tried to determine my bloodline. They found nothing. No recognizable genetic markers, no connection to any known pack. It was like I'd appeared out of thin air. Or someone went to great lengths to hide your origins," Kieran said quietly. Alara looked up sharply. "What?" "It takes powerful magic to completely erase pack scent and genetic markers. Whoever left you there didn't just abandon a baby, they made sure no one could trace you back to them." The thought had never occurred to her. She'd always assumed her parents were dead or didn't want her. But what if it was something else? Something deliberate? "The council debated what to do with me," she continued, pushing down the dangerous flutter of hope in her chest. "Some wanted to leave me at a human orphanage. But Elder Rothschild's wife, she was still alive, then she convinced them to let me stay. She thought it would show mercy, compassion." Alara's laugh was bitter. "She died when I was 3. After that, I was just here, A charity case. They put me in the servants' quarters, trained me to work, and that was my life. Did you have friends? Anyone who cared about you? The question hurt more than it should have. The other servant children were kind enough, but we all knew I was different. I was the foundling, the one with no family, no pack, no future. And when I couldn't shift. She trailed off, the old shame rising like bile. After that, even the other servants stopped seeing me as one of them. I was broken, defective. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled. When I was 15, my father declared me unfit to inherit the alpha position. Elara's eyes widened. This was not what she'd expected. I was too weak, Kieran continued, his gaze distant. Too soft. Too concerned with fairness and justice, instead of pure power. He said I'd never command respect, that the pack would tear itself apart under my leadership. His jaw tightened. He chose my younger brother as heir instead. Adrian stronger, more ruthless, everything an alpha should be. But you're alpha now, Elara said quietly. What happened? Adrian died leading a raid against the Eastern Territory 3 years ago. Glorious death in battle, exactly what he'd always wanted. And suddenly, the unfit son was all my father had left. Kieran's smile was sharp and humorless. He spent 2 years trying to find a suitable candidate from other bloodlines, anyone to avoid giving me the position. But tradition won out. When he died, the pack bond transferred to me whether he wanted it to or not. I'm sorry, Elara whispered. Don't be. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. He leaned forward, his storm-gray eyes intense. I'm telling you because I understand what it feels like to be told you're not enough. To have everyone around you see only your inadequacy. Your flaws, the ways you don't measure up to what they think you should be. His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. Maybe the throne sees what they refuse to. Survival is its own kind of strength. You had to live in a world that told you daily that you didn't matter. You had to watch everyone around you transform into their true selves while you remained stuck. You had to serve people who looked through you like you were invisible. And you're still here, still standing, still trying. Tears burned behind Elara's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. But I can't even shift. How can I be a Luna if I can't access the most basic part of what we are? I don't know, Kieran admitted. But the throne does. And right now, its judgment is the only one that matters. He stood, moving to the window where dawnlight painted the gardens gold and rose. The council meets tomorrow to render their decision. Elder Rothschild is pushing hard for your removal, claiming magical interference, arguing that accepting you would undermine centuries of tradition. He has support from most of the noble families. So I'll be executed. Elara's voice was flat. She'd known this was coming. Not if I claim you first. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elara's heart stuttered. What? Kieran turned to face her, his expression serious. As Alpha, I can claim you as my mate. It's within my rights, and it would force the council to accept you regardless of bloodline or tradition. A mate of the Alpha automatically holds Luna status. But you don't even know me. Elara's voice came out strangled. I'm nobody. You're the woman the throne chose, Kieran interrupted. And right now, that makes you the most important person in this territory, whether you feel ready for it or not. That's not a reason to mate with someone. Elara stood abruptly, panic clawing at her chest. That's political strategy. That's using me as a pawn in whatever game you're playing with the council. Yes, Kieran said simply. It is. I won't lie to you about that. The honesty was somehow more devastating than a pretty lie would have been. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm room. So what? We perform some ceremony. And suddenly I'm your Luna and everything is fine. No. We perform the ceremony, and then we deal with the 50 other crises that will immediately follow. The noble families who wanted their daughters in this position. The council members who see you as a threat to their power. The neighboring territories who will view a foundling Luna as weakness they can exploit. He crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. It won't be fine, Elara. It will be a war. But at least you'll be alive to fight it. Why? The question burst out of her. Why do you even care? You could just let them remove me, Choose someone appropriate. Maintain the status quo. Why risk your position for someone like me? Kieran was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm tired of watching tradition crush anyone who doesn't fit the mold. I'm tired of a system that values bloodline over character, appearance over ability, and maybe. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Maybe I want to believe that the throne saw something real. That you were chosen for a reason, even if we can't understand it yet. His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. You don't have to decide now. Think about it tonight. Tomorrow, when the council convenes, I'll need your answer. And if I say no, Alara whispered, then I'll do what I can to protect you, but my options will be severely limited. They'll likely exile you at best, execute you at worst. His hand dropped. The choice is yours. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to choose between a political mating and possible death, but this is the reality we're facing. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't think you're nobody. Nobody doesn't survive 23 years of being told they're worthless. Nobody doesn't maintain kindness in a world that shows them none. Nobody doesn't catch the attention of a 300-year-old magical throne. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Alara was alone again with her impossible choice. Night fell, and Alara still couldn't decide. She paced the chambers, wearing a path in the expensive carpet. Mate the Alpha, a man she barely knew, who saw her as a strategic necessity rather than a person. Refuse and face almost certain death for the crime of sitting in the wrong chair. Some choice. Around midnight, Alara gave up on sleep and returned to the window seat. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, its silver light spilling across the gardens like liquid metal, beautiful and cold and distant, just like the destiny everyone kept trying to force on her. She pressed her hand against the glass and thought about her life. Really thought about it. Without the practiced gratitude she usually wrapped around her pain. She'd spent 23 years making herself small, invisible, convenient. She'd swallowed every insult, accepted every rejection, absorbed every message that she didn't matter. And what had it gotten her? A cot in the servants' quarters and the perpetual feeling that she was one mistake away from being thrown away like trash. The throne had seen her. The throne had glowed for her. For 6 hours she'd mattered in a way she never had before. Maybe that was worth fighting for. Maybe it was worth the war Kieran promised would follow. Or maybe she was just tired of running from a life that refused to let her hide anymore. A sound from the corner of the room made her spin around. A figure emerged from the shadows near the door. How had they gotten past the guards? And Alara's breath caught. It was a woman, ancient and bent with age, wearing robes marked with symbols Alara didn't recognize. Her eyes were clouded white, but somehow she looked directly at Alara with perfect accuracy. Who? Alara started, but the woman raised a gnarled hand. Hush, child. We don't have much time. Her voice was like wind through dead leaves. They'll discover I'm here soon, and there are things you need to know before tomorrow's judgment. How did you get past the guards? A dry laugh. I am Priestess Mara. I was performing sacred rituals when your great-grandparents were still pups. A few guards don't concern me. She moved closer, surprisingly spry despite her apparent age. Come, we must go to the chamber beneath the throne room. The truth of your bloodline waits there. My bloodline? Hope and fear tangled in Alara's chest. You know where I came from? I know what you are, Mara corrected. Where you came from is a longer story, and time is short. Will you come, or will you face tomorrow's council still believing yourself worthless? Alara looked at the door, at the guards beyond it, at the gilded cage that had become her world. Then she looked at this strange priestess with her clouded eyes and forbidden knowledge. Really, there was only one choice. Show me, Alara said. Priestess Mara smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. Finally. Someone with sense. She pulled a small vial from her robes and uncorked it. Silver smoke poured out, spreading across the floor like fog. Walk through the smoke. It will take you where you need to be. And child? Yes? When you see what you truly are, don't run from it. The throne knew. The prophecy knew. It's time you knew too. Alara stepped into the silver smoke, and the world dissolved around her. Chapter 4. The Prophecy Speaks. The silver smoke carried her through impossible spaces. Alara felt herself falling, floating, being pulled through corridors that shouldn't exist. The Luna chambers disappeared, replaced by swirling mist, and the sensation of moving through layers of reality like passing through curtains. Her stomach lurched, but before panic could fully set in, her feet touched solid stone. The smoke dissipated, revealing a chamber that stole her breath. She stood in a vast underground room, carved entirely from black stone, veined with silver. The ceiling arched high above, covered in constellations that glowed with their own light, not painted, but actually luminescent, as if someone had trapped real stars in the rock. Pillars rose throughout the space, each one carved with intricate symbols and scenes that seemed to move in her peripheral vision. And everywhere on the walls, the floor, even the pillars' words had been etched in a language Alara couldn't read but somehow understood. Prophecies. "Welcome to the Chamber of Moon-Sung Truths," Priestess Mara's voice echoed from behind her. The old woman materialized from the smoke, looking more solid here, more real. "This place exists beneath the throne room, but it hasn't been opened in 300 years. Not since the last true Luna walked these halls. Why bring me here?" Alara whispered, her voice sounding too loud in the sacred silence. "Because the answers you seek were written long before you were born." Mara moved to the center of the chamber, where a circular pool of water reflected the star-covered ceiling. "Come, look into the mirror of origins. It shows what was, what is, and what might be." Alara approached slowly, each step feeling weighted with significance. The pool's surface was perfectly still, smooth as glass. When she peered into it, expecting to see her reflection, she instead saw nothing. The water showed an empty reflection, as if she didn't exist at all. Panic fluttered in her chest. "I don't see anything." "Exactly." Mara's voice was soft. "You have no reflection in the mirror of origins because your origin was deliberately erased. Someone wanted to ensure you could never be traced back to your true bloodline. But why? Who would do that?" Instead of answering, Mara raised her hands over the pool. She spoke in a language that made Alara's bones vibrate, words that tasted of moonlight and ancient power. The water began to swirl, slowly at first, then faster. Images flickered across its surface, blurred and fragmented, like memories viewed through broken glass. A woman running through snow, her breath forming white clouds in the freezing air, her arms wrapped around a bundle of baby. Fear and desperation etched into her beautiful face. The scene shifted. The same woman standing before a circle of robed figures, pleading, her mouth moving in words Alara couldn't hear, but the desperation was clear. One of the robed figures stepped forward, placing glowing hands on the baby. Light erupted, so bright it whited out the vision. When the light faded, the woman was alone at the edge of a forest. She knelt in the snow, placing the wrapped bundle beneath a tree. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed something against the baby's chest, a pendant that glowed briefly before sinking into the infant's skin and disappearing. Then the woman stood, took one last look at the child she was abandoning, and ran into the darkness. The water stilled. Alara stared at it, her heart pounding. That was my mother. Yes. She gave me up to protect me. The realization hit like a physical blow. All these years, she'd assumed she was unwanted, discarded, but that woman's face had been destroyed by grief, not indifference. "Your mother was Luna Cassandra of the Northern Wildlands," Mara said quietly. "She fled her territory 23 years ago during what the histories call the Great Purge, a systematic elimination of anyone carrying the ancient Luna bloodline. I don't understand. Why would anyone want to eliminate Lunas?" Mara gestured to the walls around them. "Read the prophecy, child. It's written here, in the language of your blood. You'll understand it even if you've never seen these symbols before." Alara turned to the nearest pillar. The symbols carved into it glowed softly as she approached. And as Mara had said, she could somehow read them. The words formed in her mind, clear as spoken language. "When the throne has darkened for 3 centuries, when the old bloodlines have forgotten their purpose, a Luna shall rise with no name to claim. Born of the forgotten, marked by the moon, she who was erased shall restore what was lost. The throne will know her, though she knows not herself. Power dormant shall wake to her touch, and through her the ancient pact shall be renewed, or broken forever, and the territories fall to shadow. Alara's hands trembled as she traced the symbols. This is about me. Yes, Mara moved beside her, pointing to another section of text. There's more. Read. She will bear no pack scent, for she is of all packs and none. She will shift not, for her true form transcends the wolf. She will be rejected by those who should embrace her, and embraced by the throne that has rejected all others. My inability to shift, Alara breathed. It's not because I'm broken. It's because your true form is something else entirely, Mara finished. The ancient Lunas weren't simply powerful shifters, child. They were bridges between worlds, conduits for the moon goddess's power on earth. They could take wolf form, yes, but that was the least of their abilities. Alara turned to face the priestess fully. Then why can't I do anything? Why do I just feel empty? Because your mother had your power sealed to protect you. Mara's expression was grave. The ritual performed when you were an infant didn't just erase your pack scent and genetic markers. It locked away your Luna abilities, making you appear powerless. Invisible. The kind of child no one would look at twice or consider a threat. The Great Purge, Alara said slowly. Someone was hunting Luna bloodlines. My mother hid me by making me seem worthless. Exactly. But she couldn't erase the throne's recognition. The throne is older than any seal, any magic. It knows what you are beneath the locks and walls, even if you don't. Mara placed a weathered hand on Alara's shoulder. Your mother saved your life by hiding you in plain sight. She gave you the gift of invisibility, even though it came with the cost of loneliness. Tears burned in Alara's eyes. All those years of feeling broken, defective, less than everyone around her, and it had been intentional. A sacrifice made by a mother who'd loved her enough to let her go. Why are you showing me this now? Alara asked, her voice thick with emotion. Why not years ago? Because the throne wasn't glowing years ago. Because you weren't ready years ago. Mara's clouded eyes somehow held infinite depth. The seal on your power was designed to break only when you were claimed by the throne. Your mother knew the prophecy. She knew that if you survived to adulthood, if you remained hidden long enough, the throne would eventually recognize you and restore what was taken. But I still can't access my power. The throne glows, but I don't feel any different. The seal is cracking, not shattered. It takes time. Mara moved to another section of the wall, where a large circular carving dominated the space. Come here. There's something you need to see. The carving depicted a woman surrounded by silver flames, her arms raised to the moon. Around her, smaller figures bowed not in submission, but in reverence. And carved into her chest right over her heart was a symbol that made Alara's breath catch. She'd seen it before. Without thinking, Alara pressed her hand to her own chest, just below her collarbone. There, hidden beneath her uniform, was a birthmark. She'd always had a crescent moon wrapped around a star. She'd thought nothing of it her entire life. Just a random mark, meaningless. That's not a birthmark, Mara said softly. That's the mark of the moon blessed. Every true Luna carries it, placed on them by the goddess herself at birth. Your mother's sealing ritual couldn't erase it. It's too fundamental to what you are. Alara pulled down the collar of her uniform, staring at the mark. In the strange light of the chamber, it seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. All this time I thought it was just me. Just something ordinary. Nothing about you is ordinary, Alara. You've just been taught to believe you are. The weight of it all crashed over her, the prophecy, her mother's sacrifice, the reason for her powerlessness, the truth of what she was supposed to become. It was too much, too big. How could she be this person the prophecy described? She was just a servant who'd sat in the wrong chair. Except she wasn't. She never had been. She'd been a Luna in hiding, and the throne had simply called her home. There's one more thing you need to understand, Mara said, her voice taking on a harder edge. The Great Purge that scattered your mother's people, it was orchestrated by someone within Silvercrest territory. Someone with enough power to command assassins, enough influence to cover it up, and enough fear of the ancient bloodlines to want them eliminated entirely. Ice flooded Alara's veins. You're saying someone here, in this territory, murdered Luna bloodlines deliberately? I'm saying the person who ordered your mother hunted is likely still alive. still in power, and still very threatened by your existence. Mara's expression was grim. The throne choosing you didn't just elevate you, child. It painted a target on your back visible to the very people who tried to erase you once before. Elder Rothschild, Alara whispered. He's been pushing hardest for my removal. He's the one calling for execution. Rothschild is old enough to have been involved, yes. But he's not clever enough to have planned it alone. There are others, council members, noble families, people who benefited from the old Lunas being eliminated. Mara moved closer, her voice urgent. Tomorrow, when the council convenes, they will do everything in their power to remove you. Not because you lack bloodline, because you have too much of it. You're the return of something they thought they'd successfully destroyed. Alara's mind raced. Alpha Kirin offered to claim me as mate, to force the council to accept me. A political alliance, Mara said thoughtfully. Smart. It would give you protection and legitimacy. But tell me, do you trust him? I don't know, Alara admitted. He says he understands what it's like to be rejected. He seems genuine. But I barely know him. Trust your instincts. The throne chose you for a reason, not just because of your bloodline, but because of who you are beneath all the locks and seals. You survived 23 years in a hostile environment while powerless. That takes strength and intelligence. Use both. Mara pulled something from her robes, a small vial filled with liquid that shimmered like captured moonlight. Drink this before you sleep tonight. It will help the seal crack further, allow more of your power to surface. It won't fully break it, that will take time and deliberate effort, but it will give you enough to defend yourself if necessary. Alara took the vial with shaking hands. What if I'm not ready? What if I can't be what the prophecy says I should be? Then you fail, and the territories fall to shadow, and everyone dies. Mara's bluntness was almost refreshing, after days of political dancing. But I don't think you'll fail. You know why? Why? Because you've already done the hardest part. You survived. Everything else is just details. The priestess raised her hands again, and silver smoke began to gather around them. It's time for you to return. The guards will be doing their rounds soon, and we can't have them finding your chambers empty. She gripped Alara's shoulders, her clouded eyes boring into Alara's with unexpected intensity. Remember this, Luna Alara of the Forgotten Line. The throne doesn't make mistakes. Your mother didn't sacrifice everything for nothing, and you are not, have never been worthless. You are exactly what this territory needs, even if they're too blind to see it yet. The smoke swallowed Alara whole. She materialized back in the Luna chambers, gasping and disoriented. The room looked exactly as she'd left it, moonlight streaming through the windows, the bed undisturbed, the guard's footsteps echoing in the hallway outside. It was as if she'd never left, but everything had changed. Alara moved to the mirror hanging over the vanity and stared at her reflection. Same plain face, same worn servant's uniform, same messy hair and tired eyes. But now she saw herself differently. She pulled down her collar and looked at the mark of the moon, blessed, glowing faintly in the dim light. Not a birthmark. A brand. Proof of what she was. Luna Cassandra's daughter. The prophesied Luna. The girl who was supposed to save them all, or watch them fall to shadow. No pressure. Alara laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. Then she uncorked the vial Mara had given her, and drank the moonlight liquid in one gulp. It tasted like starlight and promises cool and bright and terrifying. Power rushed through her like a dam breaking. Not the full flood, Mara had been clear about that, but enough to feel the change. Her senses sharpened, colors became more vivid. She could hear conversations 3 floors down, smell the distinct scent of each guard posted outside her door. Feel the pull of the moon like a physical tether connecting her to something vast and ancient. Her body began to ache, not painfully, but with the sensation of something trying to unfold inside her. The seal cracking, just as Mara had promised. Alara gritted her teeth and rode out the wave of transformation, feeling her bones shift slightly, her muscles strengthen, her very cells remembering what they were supposed to be. When it passed, she was still human-shaped, still herself, but different, stronger, more present in her own skin than she'd ever felt before. A knock on the door made her spin around. Alara? Kirin's voice. Concerned. I heard something. Are you all right? She crossed to the door and opened it before she could overthink the decision. Kieran stood there in casual clothes, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Behind him, the guards looked curious but maintained their positions. "I'm fine," Alara said, and was surprised to hear her voice come out steady, strong. "Actually, I need to talk to you. About your offer." Something flickered in his storm-gray eyes. Hope? Concern? She couldn't read him yet. "Come in," she said, stepping back. He entered, and she closed the door behind him. For a moment, they just looked at each other, this servant girl and this alpha, both rejected by their worlds in different ways, both trying to survive in a system designed to crush anyone who didn't fit. "I went somewhere tonight," Alara said quietly. "I learned things about who I am, where I came from, what I'm supposed to become, and..." Kieran's voice was carefully neutral. "And I'm terrified." The admission came out raw. "I'm not ready for any of this. I don't know how to be a Luna. I can barely access my power. I spent my whole life learning to be invisible. And now everyone's staring at me expecting miracles." She moved closer to him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. "But I'm also tired of running. Tired of being small. Tired of letting other people decide my worth." "What are you saying?" Alara took a deep breath. "I'm saying yes, to the mating claim, to the partnership, to fighting whatever war comes next." She held up a hand before he could respond. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this just to survive. I'm doing this because I'm finally ready to fight for the life I was supposed to have. And I need to know. Are you really prepared to stand beside someone the entire council wants dead?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt. Not in submission, but in a gesture of equal respect, bringing himself to her eye level. "I've spent 3 years as an alpha I never wanted to be," he said softly. "Leading a territory that still questions my right to rule, following traditions that crush anyone who's different. And every day, I've wondered if there was a better way, a different path." His hand reached out, palm up, offering, "Maybe you're that path. Maybe the throne chose you not just for what you might become, but for what you already are, someone who survived their worst without becoming cruel. Someone who maintained kindness in a world that showed them none." His fingers brushed hers. "So yes, Alara of the Forgotten Line. I'm prepared to stand beside you, to fight for you, to protect you from the people who want you erased." His smile was small but genuine. "And maybe, if we're very lucky, to build something better than what came before." Alara felt something crack open in her chest, not the seal on her power but something deeper, the wall she'd built around her heart to survive all those years of rejection. She'd been so alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone choose her deliberately. "Tomorrow," she said, threading her fingers through his, "we face the council together." "Together," he agreed. And for the first time since sitting on that cursed throne, Alara felt something other than fear. She felt ready. Chapter 5. The Rejection Ceremony. Dawn arrived like an execution date. Alara stood before the mirror in a dress someone had delivered during the night, silver silk that shimmered like moonlight, far too elegant for someone who'd spent her life in servant's clothes. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, like wearing someone else's identity. But she supposed that's exactly what she was doing. Becoming someone else. Someone the prophecy claimed she'd always been. The mark of the moon blessed pulsed beneath the dress's neckline, warm against her chest. The power Priestess Mara's potion had unlocked still hummed through her veins, not enough to transform, not enough to defend herself against trained warriors, but enough to feel less helpless than she had 3 days ago. 3 days. That's all it had taken for her entire world to collapse and rebuild itself into something unrecognizable. A knock sounded, Kieran's knock. She'd learned to recognize it. 2 quick raps, then a pause, respectful, patient. She opened the door to find him dressed in formal alpha regalia, dark leather and ceremonial armor marked with the silver crest. He looked every inch the powerful leader, except for his eyes. Those storm-gray eyes held the same uncertainty she felt. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Alara said honestly. "But I don't think I ever will be, so we might as well get this over with." Something like respect flickered across his face. "The council has assembled in the grand hall. They've turned this into a full tribunal." He hesitated. "Alara, You need to understand what's about to happen. This won't be a conversation. It will be a trial. They'll bring evidence, witnesses, accusations. They'll try to break you down publicly so that even if I claim you as mate, your authority as Luna will be destroyed before it begins. What kind of evidence could they possibly have? I sat on a chair. They'll twist everything. Your unknown origins will become proof of dark magic. Your inability to shift will be evidence of being cursed or inhuman. Your years of service will be framed as infiltration, like you were planted here decades ago, as part of some conspiracy. His jaw tightened. The truth doesn't matter to them. Only the narrative. Alara felt her stomach twist, but she forced herself to nod. Then we'll just have to create a better narrative. They walked through the palace corridors side by side, guards flanking them. Servants pressed themselves against the walls as they passed, eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Alara caught fragments of whispered conversations. Can't believe the Alpha is really going through with this. My mother says she's a witch who cursed the throne. Heard she was found in the woods raised by demons. The stories had already grown beyond recognition. In 3 days, she'd gone from invisible servant to legendary villain. The grand hall doors loomed ahead, massive oak panels carved with the history of Silvercrest territory. Battles won, treaties signed, leaders crowned. All the moments that made a pack's legacy. Soon, she'd either join that history or be erased from it entirely. The doors swung open. The hall was packed. Every council member, every noble family, every person of influence in the territory had gathered. They filled the tiered seating that rose on either side of the central floor, creating an arena atmosphere. At the far end, elevated on a platform, sat the council's judgment seats, 12 chairs for 12 elders, with Elder Rothschild in the center, looking like a king about to pass sentence. And in the middle of everything, isolated on its dais, sat the sacred Luna throne, dark, silent, waiting. The crowd's noise died as Alara entered. Hundreds of eyes tracked her movement down the central aisle, their gazes heavy with judgment. She kept her chin up, her steps steady, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. Kieran walked beside her, his presence a silent statement. She was under his protection. They stopped before the council platform. Elder Rothschild rose, his expression carved from stone and contempt. "We are gathered," his voice boomed through the hall, "to render judgment on the matter of Alara, foundling servant of Silvercrest, who claims the right to sit upon the sacred Luna throne by virtue of its recognition." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "This council will determine whether such recognition is genuine or the result of magical interference, deception, or forces that seek to undermine our sacred traditions. The throne's recognition is not in question," Kieran said, his alpha command making several council members flinch. It glowed twice. In front of hundreds of witnesses, under controlled conditions. "The throne's judgment is absolute according to our oldest laws. Laws written when the throne could be trusted," Elder Rothschild countered. "But 300 years of silence suggests the throne's magic may have deteriorated, or been corrupted." His gaze fixed on Alara like she was something diseased. "We must consider the possibility that what we witnessed was not true recognition, but rather a magical anomaly triggered by external forces." "You're suggesting I somehow corrupted a relic blessed by the moon goddess herself?" Alara's voice came out stronger than she expected. "I'm a servant who can barely light a candle with moon magic. How exactly would I accomplish that?" "That," Elder Rothschild smiled coldly, "is precisely what we intend to discover." He gestured to the side of the hall. "Bring in the first witness." A woman was escorted to the center, older, thin, with nervous eyes. Alara recognized her as one of the kitchen staff, someone who'd worked alongside her for years. "State your name," Elder Rothschild commanded. "M. Margaret, Your Eminence, head cook's assistant. And how long have you known the accused?" "Since she was a child, Your Eminence. She came to the kitchens when she was about 7. Tell the council what you observed about Alara's behavior over the years." Margaret's eyes darted to Alara, apologetic and afraid. She was always strange, Your Eminence, kept to herself, didn't make friends easy, and she was always watching, observing, like she was studying us." "Studying you?" Elder Rothschild repeated, as if gathering information. I suppose so, Your Eminence. Did she ever demonstrate unusual abilities, unexplained knowledge, signs of hidden power? Margaret hesitated. Alara could see the woman's internal struggle, tell the truth and help her, or lie and protect herself. Self-preservation 1. There were times she knew things she shouldn't. Like once, she knew the head cook had burned a roast before anyone saw it. And another time she predicted the old alpha would fall ill 3 days before he did. Gasps rippled through the hall. Alara's heart sank. Those moments had been innocent, the roast had smelled burned. And the old alpha had looked pale for days. But framed like this, they sounded sinister. Precognition, Elder Rothschild said to the assembled crowd. Or perhaps communication with dark forces that gave her information. Either way, evidence of powers she deliberately hid while infiltrating our household. That's ridiculous, Alara protested. I was a child. Silence. Rothschild's command cracked through the hall. You will speak only when directly addressed by this council. One more outburst and you will be removed and judged in absentia. Kieran's hand found hers, squeezing gently. A warning. Pick your battles. Don't give them an excuse to remove you from the room. Margaret was dismissed, and more witnesses followed. Each one presented innocent moments from Alara's life twisted into evidence of conspiracy. The time she'd taken extra food from the kitchens, clearly stealing to perform blood rituals. The time she'd been found in the library, obviously studying forbidden magic. The time she'd been late to a ceremony, deliberately positioning herself to sabotage the throne. 23 years of an unremarkable life, reconstructed into the biography of a dark sorceress. Then Elder Rothschild called his final witness, and Alara's blood turned to ice. Mistress Carolyn. The head servant entered with her spine rigid, her face carefully neutral. She'd trained Alara, supervised her, been the closest thing to family she'd ever had, and now she stood before the council, ready to testify. Mistress Carolyn, Elder Rothschild said warmly, like greeting an old friend. You've served this household for how many years? 43. Your Eminence. And you personally oversaw Alara's training and placement within the servant hierarchy? I did. Tell us in your professional opinion, was there anything unusual about this girl? Mistress Carolyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured and cold. She was too smart for her station. Most foundlings accept their place, understand the charity extended to them. But Alara always had questions. Always wanted to know why things were done certain ways. Always pushing boundaries. Ambitious, Rothschild said. Resentful, perhaps, of her lowly position? Perhaps. Would you say she had reason to want to elevate herself, to seek power she wasn't entitled to? I believe, Mistress Carolyn said slowly, each word deliberate, that every servant dreams of being more than they are. Whether they act on those dreams is another matter. It wasn't a direct condemnation, but it didn't need to be. The implication hung in the air. Alara was a scheming servant who'd manipulated the throne to escape her proper place. Alara felt something crack inside her chest. Not the seal on her power, but something more fragile. The last thread of hope that someone from her old life would stand up for her. That someone would say, she was kind, she worked hard, she didn't deserve this. But nobody did. Because they were all too afraid, or too angry, or too convinced that she was exactly what the council claimed she was, a threat. The evidence is clear, Elder Rothschild declared, turning to address the assembled crowd. We have a girl of unknown origin, demonstrating unexplained abilities, who conveniently positioned herself to touch the throne during a sacred ceremony. The so-called recognition was almost certainly magical interference designed to, then let her prove it, a voice called from the crowd. Everyone turned. A man stood in the back, tall, weathered, with the bearing of a warrior. Alara didn't recognize him, but from the way the crowd reacted, he was someone important. Commander Thorne, Elder Rothschild said, irritation bleeding through his controlled tone. You have something to contribute? I do. Commander Thorne moved down the aisle, his steps confident. You claim she used dark magic to corrupt the throne. Fine. Test her. If she has the power to manipulate a relic blessed by the moon goddess, surely she has the power to defend herself in a proper Luna's trial. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Elder Rothschild's expression darkened. You're suggesting a trial by combat? I'm suggesting we give her a chance to prove the throne didn't make a mistake. Thorn stopped beside Alara, looking down at her with eyes that held something unexpected curiosity. If she's truly Luna material, she should be able to pass the same tests every Luna candidate has historically faced. Combat. Strategy. Power demonstration. If she fails, we have our answer. If she succeeds. He shrugged. Then maybe the throne knew what it was doing. This is highly irregular, Rothschild protested. But other council members were nodding, whispering among themselves. It's traditional, Thorn countered. Every Luna in our history has proven herself through trials. Why should this one be different? Because I'll fail, Alara thought desperately. Because I can't fully shift, can't fight, can't access most of my power. They're setting me up for public humiliation followed by execution. But then she felt Kieran's hand on her back, steadying her. Heard his voice, low and meant only for her. This is better than immediate conviction. At least this way, you have a chance. A chance. The smallest, thinnest thread of possibility. Elder Rothschild clearly sensed he was losing control of the narrative. Very well, he said, his voice tight. The accused will face 3 trials. Combat prowess to prove she can defend the pack. Strategic thinking to prove she can lead. And power manifestation to prove she truly carries Luna bloodline. She will have until sunset tomorrow to prepare. His smile was cruel. After all, we want to give her every advantage. 24 hours. To learn to fight. To demonstrate leadership abilities she didn't have. And to unlock powers that were still sealed. It was impossible. And when she fails all 3? Lady Ashford called from her seat, her voice dripping satisfaction. What then? Then, Elder Rothschild said, his gaze locked on Alara. She will be exiled from Silvercrest territory permanently, forbidden from ever returning on pain of death. And the throne will be cleansed of whatever corruption she introduced. He paused. Additionally, any who supported her claim, any who vouched for her authenticity, will be held accountable for their poor judgment. The threat was clear. If Alara failed, Kieran would pay the price too. His position, his authority, possibly his life, all tied to her success or failure. This is blackmail. Kieran growled. This is justice, Rothschild countered. Now, do we have the accused's agreement to these terms? Or does she prefer immediate exile without trial? Alara looked at the throne, sitting dark and silent on its dais. She thought about her mother, who'd sacrificed everything to keep her alive. About Priestess Mara's words. You survived. Everything else is just details. About the prophecy written on those ancient walls. She who was erased shall restore what was lost. She'd spent 23 years being invisible, letting other people decide her worth. Maybe it was time to stop. I accept, Alara said, her voice carrying through the hall. I'll take your trials, all 3. And when I pass them, this council will acknowledge what the throne already knows, that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. The confidence in her voice was pure bluff. Inside, she was terrified. But she'd learned something important from years of being invisible. Sometimes you had to fake being brave until the bravery caught up. Elder Rothschild's expression suggested he knew she was bluffing, and looked forward to watching her fail. Excellent. The trials will commence tomorrow at dawn, in the ceremonial arena. Until then, the accused will remain in the Luna chambers under guard. Dismissed. The crowd erupted into conversation as people filed out. Alara caught fragments, bets being placed on how badly she'd fail, speculation about who would be chosen as Luna after she was exiled, satisfaction that the servant girl would finally be put in her place. Kieran leaned close as the guards moved to escort her out. 24 hours. We'll use every minute. I'll have the best combat trainer in the territory work with you, and we'll figure out the power manifestation. How? Alara whispered. Most of my abilities are still sealed. I felt a little of it break last night, but not enough. Not nearly enough to demonstrate Luna-level power. Then we'll break more of it. His jaw was set with determination. Your mother sealed your power to protect you. But you're not a helpless infant anymore. You're a woman facing execution if you can't access what's already yours. That kind of necessity has a way of shattering barriers. The guards surrounded them, preventing further conversation. As they led her back toward the Luna chambers, Alara caught sight of faces in the crowd, some pitying, most satisfied, a few uncertain. But one face stood out. Priestess Mara, half hidden in shadow near a pillar. The old woman's clouded eyes met Alara's, and she gave the smallest nod, a reminder, the throne doesn't make mistakes. But as Alara was locked back in her gilded cage with the weight of tomorrow's impossible trials crushing down on her, she couldn't help thinking that the throne might have severely overestimated what she was capable of. 24 hours to become someone she'd never been. 24 hours to unlock power she couldn't access. 24 hours to prove she deserved to exist. Through the window, the sun climbed higher, marking the passage of time she couldn't afford to waste. Somewhere in the palace, her enemies were celebrating her upcoming failure. And somewhere deeper, in chambers beneath the throne room, prophecies waited to be fulfilled or proven false. Alara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the mark of the moon-blessed pulse beneath her skin. "I hope you knew what you were doing," she whispered to her long-dead mother. "Because right now, I'm about to fail spectacularly in front of everyone." But failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. Too many people, Kiran. Priestess Mara, her mother's sacrifice had invested too much in her survival for her to give up now. She just had to figure out how to become a warrior, a leader, and a Luna overnight. No pressure. Chapter 6. The Quiet Before Power. The combat trainer arrived an hour after Alara returned to the Luna chambers. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6.5 feet tall, built like he'd been carved from granite and violence. Scars tracked across his bare arms, each one a story of battles survived. His eyes were the flat gray of winter ice, assessing her with the kind of professional detachment that made it clear he didn't care about politics or prophecies. He cared about whether she could fight. Commander Thorn, Kiran introduced him. Best warrior in Silvercrest territory. He's agreed to train you for tomorrow's combat trial. Thorn grunted, circling Alara like she was livestock he was considering purchasing. "How much combat training have you had?" "None," Alara admitted. "I'm a servant. We don't exactly get sword lessons. Can you shift?" The question was casual, but it cut deep. "No. My transformation has never completed." Thorn stopped circling and looked at Kiran with an expression that clearly said, "Are you serious? You want me to prepare a non-shifting servant with zero combat experience to face the combat trial?" And he glanced at the window, calculating the sun's position. "Roughly 18 hours? "Yes," Kiran said flatly. "That's impossible." "Then make the impossible happen. That's why you're the best." Thorn muttered something that sounded like a creative combination of curses, then turned back to Alara. "All right. Show me what you've got. Attack me." Alara blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Attack me. Punch, kick, bite, whatever instinct tells you to do. I need to see what I'm working with." This was humiliating. Alara looked at Kiran, hoping he'd intervene, but he just nodded encouragingly. She turned back to Thorn, this massive warrior who looked like he could snap her in half without effort, and tried to imagine actually hurting him. She swung a fist at his chest, a pathetic, weak thing that had no power behind it. Thorn caught her wrist before the blow landed. "Terrible. Your stance is wrong. You telegraphed the punch from a mile away, and you aimed for the strongest part of my body instead of a vulnerable point." He released her wrist. "Again. This time, commit to it. I've seen children hit harder than that." Heat flooded Alara's face. She tried again, putting more force into it. Thorn dodged easily and swept her legs out from under her. She hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. "You're thinking too much," he said, standing over her. "Combat isn't about thinking. It's about reacting. Your body knows how to protect itself, you just need to get out of your own way." He extended a hand to pull her up. "Problem is, you've spent your whole life making yourself small. Invisible. That's the opposite of what you need in a fight." Alara took his hand and let him haul her to her feet. "So how do I fix that in 18 hours? "You don't fix it. You work around it." Thorn moved to the center of the room, gesturing for her to face him. "You'll never be a brawler, you're too small. Not enough muscle mass, no training time, but you're quick, light on your feet, low center of gravity, we can use that." For the next hour, he drilled her relentlessly. Not complex techniques, there was no time for that, but dirty, practical fighting. How to use her smaller size as an advantage. Where to strike to cause maximum pain with minimum force. How to read an opponent's body language to predict their next move. How to fall without getting hurt. How to roll away from attacks. How to use momentum against larger opponents. Alara's body screamed in protest. She'd thought years of servant work had kept her fit, but this was different. This was discovering muscles she didn't know she had by making them burn. She fell repeatedly, got knocked down, had the wind driven from her lungs more times than she could count. But something started to shift. That power Priestess Mara's potion had awakened. The cracks in her seal began responding to the physical exertion. Her reflexes quickened slightly. Her strikes landed with unexpected force. Her senses sharpened until she could track Thorn's movements with unusual clarity. "There," Thorn said, breathing slightly harder after she managed to dodge one of his attacks. "That's not normal speed. You tapped into something." "My Luna abilities," Alara explained between gasps for air. "They're partially sealed, but stress seems to break pieces of the seal." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "Then we need more stress." Kieran shift. Kieran, who'd been watching from the side of the room, straightened. "You want me to fight her?" "I want you to hunt her. Controlled, obviously you're not actually trying to hurt her, but prey instinct is different than combat training. If stress breaks the seal, terror should shatter it." "Absolutely not," Kieran said immediately. "I'm not. I'll do it." Alara interrupted. Both men looked at her in surprise. "He's right. I need to access more power, and I'm running out of time. If being hunted breaks more of the seal, then that's what we do." "Alara," Kieran started, but she cut him off. "Tomorrow I face trained warriors who want to see me dead. This is preparation. So unless you have a better idea for unlocking my abilities in the next 17 hours, we're doing this." Kieran looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Finally, he nodded, moving toward the door. "Outside. The gardens. More room to run, and the guards can maintain a perimeter." His eyes met hers, stormy and conflicted. "If I hurt you, you won't," Alara said with more confidence than she felt. "Because I'm going to be too fast to catch." The gardens were beautiful in the late afternoon light, cultivated wilderness, all planned chaos and hidden order. Alara stood in the center of a cleared space, while Kieran moved to the far end, near the tree line. Guards had been posted around the perimeter, watching with expressions ranging from concern to morbid curiosity. Thorn positioned himself near Alara. "Simple rules. He hunts, you evade. Use the environment, trees, rocks, whatever helps. Don't let him corner you. When he catches you, because he will eventually fight back, hard as you can." He paused. "And Alara? The moment you feel your power surge, don't fight it. Let it out. What if I lose control? Then we deal with it. But I suspect you've spent so long controlling yourself, suppressing everything you feel, that losing control isn't really something you're capable of." He stepped back. "Ready?" "No," Alara wanted to say. She wasn't ready for any of this, not the trials, not the combat, not having an alpha hunt her through the gardens like prey. But ready or not, dawn was coming. "Ready," she lied. Thorn looked at Kieran and nodded. The transformation was breathtaking. Alara had seen shifters transform before it was a normal part of pack life, but never an alpha. Never this close, never directed at her. Kieran's body rippled and reshaped, bones cracking and reforming, skin giving way to thick dark fur. He dropped to all fours as his spine extended, his face elongating into a wolf's muzzle full of teeth designed for killing. He was massive in wolf form, easily the size of a small horse, with eyes that glowed silver in the fading light. Those eyes fixed on her, and Alara's hindbrain screamed one word: "Run." She ran. Her servant's dress had been replaced by training clothes, practical pants, and a tunic that wouldn't restrict movement, and she was grateful for it now as she sprinted toward the tree line. Behind her, she heard the soft thud of paws hitting earth, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Alara dove behind a large oak tree just as Kieran's form flashed past where she'd been standing. Her heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline flooding her system. She could hear him circling back, hunting. The rational part of her brain knew he wouldn't actually hurt her. But the prey animal part, the part that had never successfully shifted but still carried wolf instincts, knew only that a predator was close. She moved quickly, keeping low, using the trees for cover. Her enhanced senses, those cracks in her seal, were firing now, showing her details she'd normally miss. The pattern of broken twigs that indicated his path, the slight shift in air currents as he moved, the way shadows fell differently when something large disrupted them. There, to her left. She pivoted right, scrambling over a fallen log and dropping into a small depression in the ground. She pressed herself flat, controlling her breathing. Kieran's massive wolf form padded past, so close she could smell earth and pine and something distinctly him. He paused, sniffing the air. Alara held perfectly still, her heart beating so loud she was certain he could hear it. Then he turned his head and looked directly at her hiding spot. Their eyes met his glowing silver, hers wide with fear, and she saw the moment he committed to the chase. He lunged. Alara rolled, came up running, her body moving on pure instinct. The seal cracked further, she felt it like ice breaking inside her chest. Her speed increased, her reflexes sharpened, her senses exploded outward until she could track every movement in the garden simultaneously. But it wasn't enough. Kieran was still faster, still stronger, still a predator in his prime, hunting someone who'd never learned to truly run. He cut her off near the fountain, blocking her escape. Alara spun, looking for another route, but he'd cornered her perfectly. The fountain at her back, a wall to her left, him blocking the only clear exit. She was trapped. "Use your power," Thorn's voice called from somewhere behind the perimeter. "Stop running and fight. Fight." How? She didn't have claws or fangs. She couldn't shift. All she had was this partial awakening of abilities she didn't understand, and the mark of the Moonblessed burned against her chest. Power surged through her like lightning, making her gasp. Not the gentle warmth of the throne's recognition, but something wild and primal and vast. The seal didn't just crack, it shattered. Pieces of it fell away inside her, releasing abilities that had been locked since infancy. Alara's hands began to glow with silver light. She stared at them, shocked, as the luminescence spread up her arms like liquid moonlight. The same light that had erupted from the throne, now emanating from her body. She could feel it responding to her fear, her desperation, her absolute need to survive. Kieran's wolf form hesitated, recognizing something in her that hadn't been there moments before. Alara raised her glowing hands, acting on instinct rather than knowledge. The light coalesced, forming a barrier between them, not solid, but tangible enough that when Kieran tried to advance, the barrier repelled him gently. Not violently, not with the explosive force the throne had used. This was different. Protective. Controlled. "Good," Thorn shouted. "Now push back. Show dominance." Dominance. The word felt foreign. She'd never dominated anything in her life, but the power flowing through her seemed to understand what was needed. She pushed, and the barrier expanded, forcing Kieran to step back. The glowing light intensified until the entire garden was bathed in silver radiance. Then, without warning, pain lanced through her body. Her bones began to shift, not completely, not into full wolf form, but something between. Alara cried out, as her spine arched, as her hands curved into claws, as her senses exploded into something beyond human. The partial transformation she'd experienced as a child, except this time it wasn't stopping halfway. It was continuing. Through the haze of pain and transformation, she was dimly aware of Kieran shifting back to human form, concern etched across his face. Of Thorn moving closer, monitoring but not interfering. Of guards murmuring in shock. But mostly she was aware of the feeling of becoming. Of walls inside her crumbling. Of power that had been suppressed for 23 years finally being allowed to exist. Of her body remembering what it was supposed to be, even if it had forgotten how to get there. The transformation stabilized in a form that was neither fully human nor fully wolf. Alara looked down at herself, at hands tipped with silver claws, at arms covered in a fine shimmer of power rather than fur, at a body that was still recognizably hers but enhanced, stronger, faster, more. And surrounding her, pulsing from her skin in waves, was that same silver light the throne had shown. Her light. Her power. "Impossible," one of the guards whispered. But Thorn was grinning like a wolf himself. "Not impossible, just rare. She's manifesting a Luna form, the ancient transformation that predates regular shifting. It's what the old bloodlines could do before the power was diluted over generations. Alara tried to speak, but her vocal cords weren't quite right in this form. What came out was something between words and a wolf's growl, understandable but inhuman. How do I change back? Kieran approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Same way you shifted intent. You wanted to defend yourself, and your body responded. Now you want to return to human form. Tell your body that. It took several tries. Her form flickered between states fully human, this hybrid Luna form, brief flashes of something that might have been full wolf but never solidified. Each transformation sent new waves of pain through her body as muscles and bones reshaped themselves. Finally, gasping and shaking, she collapsed back into fully human form. Kieran caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he murmured, lowering them both to sit on the grass. "Just breathe. First transformation is always brutal, especially when it's a rare form like this." Alara leaned against his chest, too exhausted to care about propriety. Her whole body felt like it had been taken apart and reassembled incorrectly. "That was incredible," Thorn finished, crouching nearby. "You've got raw power, girl. More than enough for tomorrow's power manifestation trial. The combat trial will still be difficult, but at least now you can defend yourself if cornered." "What about the strategic thinking trial?" Alara asked weakly. "How do we prepare for that?" "We don't," Kieran said quietly. "Strategy isn't something you can cram in a few hours. It comes from experience, from understanding pack dynamics and politics." His arms tightened around her slightly. "But you've survived 23 years in a hostile environment without power or protection. That's strategy. You'll just have to trust that the same instincts that kept you alive this long will guide you tomorrow." Thorn stood, brushing dirt from his pants. "I'll leave you too. She needs rest more than more training at this point. Dawn comes early, and she needs to be sharp." He nodded to Kieran. "Good luck tomorrow, Alpha. You're going to need it." After Thorn left with the guards, Kieran and Alara sat in the garden, as twilight deepened around them. She was still leaning against him, too tired to move, and he seemed content to let her. "You didn't hesitate," Alara said quietly. "When Thorn suggested hunting me, part of you wanted to say no, but you agreed because you knew it would help. I always hesitate when someone asks me to potentially hurt people. He paused, and Alara felt his chest rise and fall with a deeper breath. "People under my protection." She twisted to look up at him. In the fading light, his storm-gray eyes looked darker, more troubled. "What were you really going to say?" "Nothing important," but his gaze dropped to her lips for just a fraction of a second before he looked away. "We should get you back inside. You need food and sleep." "Kieran." She said his name softly, and his eyes returned to hers. "Thank you. For standing by me. For believing the throne didn't make a mistake. For," her voice cracked slightly, "for being the first person in my entire life to choose me deliberately." Something broke in his expression, that careful control he always maintained, the mask of alpha authority. What emerged beneath it was raw and uncertain and achingly human. "You make it sound noble," he said roughly. "Like I'm doing this purely out of duty or honor. But the truth is..." He stopped, jaw working like he was fighting with words that wanted to escape. "The truth is what?" Alara whispered. "The truth is, I see you, Alara. Not the Luna candidate. Not the political problem. Not even the prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. I see the woman who maintained kindness in a world that showed her none. Who stood before a hostile council and refused to apologize for existing. Who just let an alpha hunt her through the gardens because she was desperate enough to do whatever it took to survive." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture achingly gentle. "And I'm terrified because I didn't expect to actually care. This was supposed to be political strategy. But somewhere between the throne room and tonight, it became real." Alara's breath caught. "Kieran, you don't have to say anything. I know this isn't fair. You're facing execution tomorrow, and I'm confessing feelings like an idiot." He started to pull back, but Alara caught his hand. "I spent my whole life being invisible," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I learned to survive by not wanting things I couldn't have, by not hoping for more than scraps. And then you showed up with food and conversation, and the insane idea that maybe I deserved to be seen. She held his gaze, letting him see all the fear and hope and desperate longing she usually kept buried. You scare me, Kieran. Not because you're dangerous, but because you make me want things. A future. A place to belong. Someone who chooses me not because prophecy demands it, but because they actually want to. I do, he said immediately, fiercely. Want to, choose you. They were inches apart now, the air between them charged with everything they weren't quite saying. Alara could feel his breath against her lips, could see the conflict in his eyes, wanting to close the distance but afraid of taking advantage of her vulnerability. So she closed it instead. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like neither of them quite believed this was allowed. But then Kieran's hand cupped the back of her neck and pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like drowning and breathing at the same time, desperate and gentle, and absolutely necessary. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. We shouldn't have done that. Probably not, Alara grinned. Terrible timing. The worst. You're facing 3 impossible trials at dawn, and I just complicated everything by giving me something to fight for besides survival? Alara finished. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I was going to fight because the prophecy said I should. Because people sacrificed for me. Because I was tired of running. But now? She touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under her palm. Now I'm fighting, because I want to see what happens next. With you. With us. With whatever impossible future might exist if I somehow survive tomorrow. Kieran turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. Then survive. Pass their trials. Prove them all wrong. And when it's over, we figure out what comes next. Alara finished. They sat in the garden as stars emerged overhead, holding each other like anchors in a storm. Tomorrow would bring trials designed to break her, would bring enemies who wanted her dead, and allies whose faith she couldn't afford to lose. Would bring the moment of truth where she either proved the throne right or died trying. But tonight, for these few stolen moments, she wasn't a Luna candidate or a political problem or a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. She was just Alara. And she was chosen. Chapter 7, The Grand Betrayal. Dawn arrived with the sound of drums. Alara woke to the deep, rhythmic pounding that echoed through the palace, the traditional call to trial. A sound that hadn't been heard in Silvercrest territory in over 50 years. She dressed in the clothes that had been left for her, simple black pants and a fitted tunic, practical for combat, but marked with silver thread along the seams. The mark of the moon-blessed pulsed against her chest, warm and steady, a reminder of the power she'd finally accessed last night. She could still feel it humming beneath her skin, not fully unleashed, not completely under control, but present. Real. Hers. The question was whether it would be enough. Guards escorted her through corridors already packed with spectators. The entire territory had turned out to watch servants pressed against walls, nobles filling every available space. Even children perched on their parents' shoulders to catch a glimpse of the foundling who dared claim the throne. Their faces blurred together. Some curious, some hostile, many eager to witness her failure. The ceremonial arena had been prepared overnight. It was an ancient space, rarely used, carved into the earth itself with tiered stone seating rising on all sides. The floor was packed dirt, stained dark with the blood of countless trials throughout history. In the center, 3 stations had been erected, one for each trial. The council sat in a special box overlooking the arena. Elder Rothschild in the center like a king about to watch gladiators. Beside him sat the noble families, all dressed in their finest, treating this like entertainment rather than a woman fighting for her life. Kieran stood near the arena entrance, his expression carefully controlled. When Alara approached, he caught her hand briefly, squeezing once. No words, they'd said everything that mattered last night. But his touch steadied her, reminded her she wasn't alone. The accused will enter the arena. Elder Rothschild's voice boomed across the space, magically amplified. Let the trials begin. Alara walked to the center of the arena, her head high despite the fear churning in her stomach. The crowd's noise swelled, jeers and cheers mixing into an incomprehensible roar. She turned slowly, taking in the faces. So many people who'd ignored her for 23 years, now riveted by her existence. The first trial, Rothschild announced. "We'll test combat prowess. Aluna must be able to defend her pack against threats. She will face 3 opponents of increasing difficulty. Defeat them all, or be defeated and removed from consideration. 3 opponents." Alara's mouth went dry. Thorn had trained her for one-on-one combat, using her speed and small size as advantages. But 3? One after another, when she was already exhausted? A gate on the far side of the arena opened. Her first opponent emerged. It was Vivian Ashford. The blonde candidate who'd been rejected by the throne, wore armor now light leather designed for mobility, a short sword strapped to her hip. She'd trained for combat her entire life. This was her element. "I volunteered for this," Vivian called across the arena, her voice carrying clearly. "I want everyone to see what happens when a pretender faces real skill. No referee. No rules about killing. Just 2 women and an arena, with only one allowed to walk away victorious." Vivienne drew her sword. Alara had no weapon. That was probably intentional. They wanted to see if her Luna powers could compensate. She dropped into the defensive stance Thorn had drilled into her, feeling her power stir beneath her skin. Vivian attacked first, fast and precise. Her blade whistled through the air where Alara's throat had been a second earlier. Alara twisted away, using her smaller size to dodge, but Vivian anticipated the movement. Her boot caught Alara's ribs, sending her sprawling. Pain exploded through her side. The crowd roared approval. Alara rolled as Vivian's sword stabbed into the dirt where she'd been. She came up on her feet, gasping, feeling her power surge in response to the threat. Her hands began to glow with that silver light. "Parlor tricks," Vivian sneered, circling. "You can't even shift properly." "What kind of Luna can't shift?" The old shame tried to rise, but Alara pushed it down. She wasn't broken. She was different. The prophecy had said so. The throne had recognized it. Vivian lunged again. This time, Alara raised her glowing hands, and the light formed a shield exactly like it had last night with Kieran. The sword struck the barrier, and was deflected with a shower of silver sparks. Vivian's eyes widened. She attacked again, faster, striking from multiple angles. Each time Alara's shield reformed, protecting her. But maintaining it was exhausting. She could feel her power draining, the seal on her abilities not yet fully broken enough to sustain this level of output. She needed to end this quickly. Thorn's words echoed in her mind. "Use your advantages. You're quick, light on your feet. Make them come to you, then strike when they're off balance." Alara dropped the shield, and ran not away, but in a circle around Vivienne, forcing the other woman to turn, to track her movement. Vivienne was good, but she was also armored, carrying a sword. Alara was unencumbered, faster, more agile. On her third pass, Vivienne swung wide, overcommitting to the strike. Alara ducked under the blade and drove her glowing fist into Vivienne's solar plexus, not with human strength, but channeling the Luna power through the blow. The impact sent Vivienne flying backward. She crashed into the arena wall and slumped, unconscious. The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in outrage. Alara stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, her hands still glowing. She'd won, one opponent down. "Impressive," Elder Rothschild said, though his tone suggested he'd swallowed something bitter. Second opponent enter. The gate opened again. This time, a massive man emerged easily as large as Commander Thorn, covered in scars and wearing the expression of someone who killed for a living. He carried no weapon because he didn't need one. His hands were registered as lethal weapons themselves. He didn't speak, didn't posture, just moved toward Alara, with the steady inevitability of death itself. Alara's power was already depleted from the first fight. She could feel it flickering, struggling to maintain even basic enhancement. This opponent was smarter than Vivian. He didn't rush in, didn't give her openings. He advanced slowly, cutting off escape routes, forcing her into a corner. When he attacked, it was with brutal efficiency. His fist connected with her shoulder before she could dodge, spinning her around. Her attempted shield formed too slowly. He punched through it, his knuckles catching her temple. Stars exploded across Alara's vision. She tasted blood. The crowd's noise became distant, muffled. "Get up," she told herself. "You promised Kieran you'd fight. You promised yourself you'd stop being invisible. But her body wasn't cooperating. The man grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off the ground with one hand. His grip tightened, cutting off her air. In the stands, she could see Lady Ashford smiling with savage satisfaction. Could see Elder Rothschild leaning forward, anticipating her death. Could see Kieran trying to climb into the arena, held back by guards. Her vision began to gray at the edges. This was it. She'd survived 23 years of rejection and hardship, had finally discovered who she was, had shared one perfect kiss with someone who chose her, and she was going to die in the dirt of an arena, strangled by a man whose name she didn't even know. No. Something inside her roared in defiance, not human, not quite wolf. Something ancient and vast and absolutely unwilling to surrender. The mark of the moon blessed erupted with light so bright it was blinding. Power exploded from Alara's body. Not controlled or directed, just raw desperation made manifest. The man was thrown backward with enough force to crater the arena wall. Alara collapsed to her hands and knees, gasping for air, silver light pouring from her skin like she'd become a star fallen to earth. She could feel it now, the final barriers of her seal shattering completely. All the power her mother had locked away, all the abilities that made her what she was, flooding through her system at once. It was too much, too fast. Her body wasn't ready for this much raw power, but it was her only chance. Alara pushed herself to her feet, silver flames wrapping around her arms. The massive man recovered, shook off the impact, and charged again because he was paid to kill, and he was very good at his job. This time, Alara didn't defend. She attacked. She moved faster than human eyes could track, her luniform partially manifesting, not fully transformed but enhanced, stronger, more. She struck him once, twice, 3 times, each blow channeling power she was barely controlling. The man tried to grab her again, but she was smoke and moonlight, impossible to catch. The 4th strike dropped him. He hit the ground and didn't rise. Alara stood over him, chest heaving, her whole body glowing with barely contained power. The arena had gone completely silent. Even the nobles looked shocked. "Third opponent," Elder Rothschild said, his voice tight. "Enter now." The gate didn't open. Rothschild's face darkened. I said, "Send in the 3rd opponent." Still nothing. Commander Thorne's voice carried from the stands. "There is no 3rd opponent, Elder Rothschild. You only prepared 2. If you want a 3rd, you'll have to face her yourself." The challenge hung in the air, dangerous, and pointed. Rothschild couldn't fight her, he was counsel, not a warrior. And refusing to continue after she'd defeated 2 opponents would make it clear this trial had been designed to kill her rather than test her. "The combat trial is complete," a new voice announced. Kieran stepped into the arena, moving to stand beside Alara. His presence was a statement. She was under his protection. She has proven her ability to defend the pack. We proceed to the 2nd trial. Rothschild looked like he wanted to argue, but other council members were nodding, murmuring agreement. He'd lost this round, and they both knew it. "Very well," he said coldly. "The 2nd trial tests strategic thinking. The accused will be presented with a scenario and must demonstrate her ability to make sound leadership decisions under pressure." A large table was brought into the arena, covered with a map of the territory and surrounding regions. Tokens and markers indicated pack positions, resources, threats. Alara recognized it immediately, a strategic planning exercise, the kind nobles trained for from childhood. She'd never seen one before yesterday. Elder Rothschild descended from his box to stand at the table. "The scenario. The Eastern Territory has launched a surprise attack on our borders. Their forces outnumber ours 2 to 1. Simultaneously, a plague has broken out in our southern villages, requiring healers and resources. You have limited warriors, and even more limited supplies. What do you do?" It was a nightmare scenario, the kind with no good answers, only varying degrees of loss. Alara stared at the map, feeling the weight of expectation crushing down on her. This wasn't her strength. She didn't know military strategy, didn't understand supply chains or tactical positioning, but she understood people. She understood survival, and she understood that sometimes the obvious answer was the wrong one. "I evacuate the southern villages," she said slowly, working through it as she spoke. Move the sick and healthy alike to the fortified northern region, away from both the plague and the border conflict. Abandoning territory shows weakness, Rothschild countered immediately. Abandoning sick people to die shows cruelty, Alara shot back. The Eastern Territory wants our land, but they don't want plague. Moving the infected toward fortified positions means they'll either have to retreat because attacking plague victims makes them look like monsters, or they'll risk their own forces getting sick. She moved tokens on the process map, showing village movements. Meanwhile, I send a small force not to fight, but to sabotage their supply lines. Make the invasion costly. Make them ask if the land is worth the price. You'd refuse to defend our borders directly? Lady Pemberton called from the stands. What kind of Luna runs from a fight? The kind who understands that winning isn't always about direct confrontation, Alara said, her voice carrying across the arena. You want me to throw our warriors against a force twice our size? We'd lose. Everyone would die trying to hold ground that can be retaken later. But if I save our people, make the invasion expensive, and force the enemy to question their strategy, we survive to fight another day on terms that favor us. She looked directly at Rothschild. You asked what I'd do. That's what I'd do. Save people first, protect territory second, and make our enemies regret attacking us even if we can't stop them immediately. Rothschild's jaw tightened. Unconventional. Arguably cowardly. Cowardly would be sacrificing people to maintain appearances, Kieran said, his voice hard. She's thinking like someone who's actually had to survive impossible situations rather than someone who learned strategy from books. Other council members were nodding, discussing among themselves. Alara could see the debate playing out. Some agreed with Rothschild that her answer showed weakness, others seemed impressed by her pragmatic approach. The second trial is acceptable, Rothschild finally conceded, each word looking painful. Which brings us to the final trial. Power manifestation. His smile was cruel. Demonstrate that you possess true Luna bloodline abilities. Show us the power that supposedly qualifies you to lead. This was what everything had been building toward, the moment of truth. Either she could manifest power worthy of a Luna, or she couldn't, and if she couldn't, all the combat skill and strategic thinking in the world wouldn't matter. Alara stood in the center of the arena, still glowing from the previous fight. She could feel the power thrumming through her veins, no longer sealed but also not entirely under control. It was like holding lightning, dangerous, unstable, barely contained. Well? Rothschild prompted. We're waiting. Alara closed her eyes, reaching for the power Priestess Mara had told her about. The abilities that made ancient Lunas more than just strong shifters. She was a bridge between worlds, a conduit for the moon goddess's power. She just had to figure out how to. Pain lanced through her chest, not from injury, but from something else. Something wrong. Alara's eyes snapped open as realization crashed over her. The silver light pouring from her body wasn't just power manifesting. It was power escaping. The seal hadn't broken cleanly, it had shattered, and now her abilities were leaking out uncontrolled. She was burning through her life force. Alara? Kieran's voice, concerned. He could see it too, the way her light was beginning to flicker, the way her body was starting to tremble. I'm fine, she lied, trying to pull the power back under control. But it was like trying to catch water in her hands. The harder she grasped, the more slipped through her fingers. In the stands, Alara saw Elder Rothschild smile. Not surprise, not shock. Satisfaction. He'd known this would happen. Fascinating, Rothschild said, his voice carrying clearly. It appears the girl is burning out. Happens sometimes when someone accesses power they're not meant to wield. The body rejects abilities that don't truly belong to it. That's a lie, Kieran snarled. Her seal was broken improperly. Or perhaps there was never any real power to seal. Rothschild interrupted smoothly. Perhaps what we've witnessed today was nothing more than borrowed magic. Stolen power that's now consuming its thief. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Fear, disgust, vindication that they'd been right all along. She was a fraud. Alara fell to her knees, the silver light pulsing erratically. She could feel herself dying. Could feel the power that was supposed to save her instead, burning her from the inside out. And in that moment, she understood. This had been the plan all along. The trials had never been about proving herself. They'd been about forcing her to use power she couldn't control, breaking her seal prematurely, and letting her destroy herself from within. Rothschild had orchestrated everything: the combat that forced her to access her abilities, the pressure that shattered the seal completely, the final demand for manifestation that would make her burn out spectacularly in front of everyone. He'd turned her own power into a weapon against her. "Someone help her!" Kieran was shouting, trying to reach her, but guards held him back. "She's dying. She's revealing herself," Rothschild corrected coldly. "As the fraud we always knew she was. The throne may have glowed, but that doesn't make her worthy. It makes her a magical anomaly." Ilara's vision blurred. The arena spun around her. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, her body shutting down as the uncontrolled power consumed her from within. She was going to die here, in front of everyone, proving Rothschild right, proving that she was never meant to survive. Through the haze of pain, she saw Kieran finally break through the guards, running toward her. Saw the desperation on his face. Saw him reaching for her like he could somehow pull her back from death through sheer force of will. But she was already falling, down into darkness, down into the space between heartbeats, down into silver light, pure and vast and ancient. Ilara found herself standing in that space between worlds, her body somewhere far above, dying in the dirt. Here, there was no pain, no fear, just the endless expanse of moonlight and the feeling of being seen by something immense. "Luna Ilara," a voice spoke, not words exactly, but meaning transmitted directly into her consciousness. "Daughter of Cassandra. Last of the ancient line, you stand at the threshold." "I'm dying," Ilara said, and was surprised to hear her voice work in this place. "My power is killing me." "Your power is not killing you. Your fear is." The presence moved closer, still formless, but somehow maternal, comforting. "The seal your mother placed was meant to break gradually as you matured, but you forced it open all at once, and now you drown in abilities you don't know how to contain. Then I'm already dead. You are dying. There is a difference." The presence wrapped around her like moonlight made tangible. "You have a choice, daughter. Return to your body and try to control power you don't understand, likely dying in the attempt. Or surrender. Let yourself fall. Let the power consume you. Become part of me once more." "That's not a choice," Ilara whispered. "That's just two ways to die." "Is it?" The presence sounded almost amused. "You've spent your life believing you were broken, worthless, not enough. But what if surrendering isn't death? What if it's transformation?" "I don't understand." The ancient lunas were bridges between worlds, Ilara. They didn't control the moon goddess's power. They became it. They surrendered their small human need for control and allowed themselves to become vessels for something greater. The presence pulsed with warmth. "Your mother sealed your power because she knew you'd need to learn who you were before you could handle what you might become. You've learned. You've suffered. You've survived. You've loved. You know yourself now. So the question is, are you brave enough to let that self dissolve and become something more?" Ilara thought about Kieran's face, about the prophecy, about her mother running through snow with a baby in her arms, about 23 years of being told she didn't matter, and 3 days of discovering she mattered more than anyone imagined. "If I surrender," she asked quietly, "will I still be me?" "You will be more than you. You will be us. I'll lose myself. You will find yourself. The self you were always meant to become." Ilara closed her eyes, or thought she did, in this strange place. She thought about control, about holding tight to who she was, about protecting the small, scared girl who'd learned to survive by being invisible. And then she thought about the throne's warmth, about Kieran's kiss, about the moment she'd finally felt like she belonged somewhere. She'd spent her whole life holding on. Maybe it was time to let go. "All right," Ilara whispered into the silver vastness. "I surrender. Take me. Transform me. Make me whatever I need to be." "Brave daughter," the presence said, approval radiating through the words. "Your mother would be proud." And then the silver light consumed her completely. Chapter 8. The Return. In the arena, Ilara's body had gone still. Kieran held her against his chest, feeling for a heartbeat that was barely there, a faint flutter, growing weaker with each passing second. The silver light that had been consuming her had suddenly intensified to blinding brightness, then vanished completely. Now she lay limp in his arms, her skin cold, her breathing so shallow it was almost imperceptible. "No," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "No. You don't get to leave. Not now. Not after everything." Around them, the arena had descended into chaos. Some people were celebrating her apparent death, vindicated in their belief that she'd been a fraud all along. Others looked uncertain, disturbed by watching someone die slowly in public. A few, very few, looked genuinely grieved. Elder Rothschild stood at the edge of the arena, his expression carefully neutral. But Kieran saw the satisfaction in his eyes. This was what he'd wanted. What he'd planned for. "She's gone," Rothschild announced, his voice magically amplified across the arena. "The throne's light has extinguished along with the girl's life. Nature has rendered its verdict. She was never meant to bear Luna power. The trials are concluded. The accused has failed by virtue of death. You murdered her." Kieran snarled, his alpha command making several people flinch. "You knew breaking her seal prematurely would kill her. You orchestrated this entire trial to force her into a situation she couldn't survive." "I orchestrated nothing," Rothschild said smoothly. "I merely tested her as tradition demands. If she was truly meant to be Luna, she would have survived. Her death proves she was an imposter all along." He turned to address the crowd. "The throne will be cleansed. A proper Luna selection will be scheduled, and we will forget this unfortunate incident." Thunder cracked across a cloudless sky. The sound was so loud, so unexpected, that everyone in the arena froze. The air pressure dropped suddenly, making ears pop, and the temperature plummeted, as if winter had arrived in the space between heartbeats. In Kieran's arms, Alara's body began to glow again. Not the flickering, dying light from before. This was different, stronger, deliberate. Silver luminescence poured from her skin in waves, not consuming her but emanating from her like she'd become a living star. Her mark of the moon blessed blazed so bright it was visible through her clothing. Kieran felt her heartbeat strengthen. Felt warmth return to her skin. Felt her body arch as she drew in a gasping breath. Her eyes opened. They were silver. Completely silver, not just the irises, but the whites too, glowing with inner light. When she looked at Kieran, he saw recognition there, saw her, but also something more. Something vast and ancient, looking through her eyes. "Elara?" he whispered. She smiled, tender and familiar, and hers. "I'm here," she said, and her voice carried harmonics it hadn't before, like multiple tones speaking in unison. "I'm still me, just more." She stood, and Kieran had to release her, had to watch as she rose to her feet in one fluid motion. The silver light intensified, spreading across the arena floor like liquid mercury. Where it touched, symbols appeared, the same ancient markings that covered the sacred Luna throne, now burning themselves into the packed earth. The crowd gasped. Some people moved toward the exits, but most were frozen, unable to look away. Alara turned to face the council platform where Elder Rothschild stood, his carefully neutral expression cracking into something that looked like fear. "You wanted proof of Luna bloodline," Alara said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the space without magical amplification. The power in her words made the air vibrate. "You wanted to see power worthy of the throne. So watch." She raised her hands, and the earth responded. The arena floor cracked. Not violently, more like the earth was reshaping itself according to her will. Stone pillars rose from the ground, each one carved with flowing symbols that glowed silver. The tiered seating shifted, repositioning itself into a perfect circle around the arena floor. And in the center, beneath Alara's feet, a platform began to form, not built, but grown from the earth itself, rising until she stood elevated above everyone. It looked exactly like the dais that held the sacred Luna throne in the palace. "Impossible," someone whispered. "She's terraforming. That's ancient magic. No one's done that in 3 centuries. Alara gestured, and silver flames erupted from her palms, not fire that burned, but pure moonlight given form. The flames danced between her fingers, responsive to her thoughts, under perfect control. She directed them outward, and they spread across the arena in a protective circle, not threatening but establishing clear boundaries. This was her space now. Her territory. You said I couldn't shift properly, Alara said, her silver eyes fixed on Rothschild. You were right. I can't shift into a normal wolf form. Want to know why? She didn't wait for an answer. Her body began to transform, not into the partial hybrid form she'd managed before, but into something that made the entire crowd gasp in awe and terror. Silver light wrapped around her like living armor. Her form expanded, grew, became something between wolf and human and pure celestial energy. She was massive now, easily 8 feet tall, covered in what looked like moonlight made solid, with eyes that burned with silver fire. Claws of pure energy extended from her hands. A corona of light surrounded her head like a crown. This was the Luna form in its full manifestation, the form ancient Lunas had taken when they needed to channel the moon goddess's power directly. The form that predated regular shifting, that transcended it entirely. This, Alara's voice resonated through the arena, impossible to ignore, is what the throne recognized. This is what my mother sealed to protect me. This is what you tried to destroy because you were afraid of what it represented. She descended from the platform, each step deliberate, moving toward the council box. Guards moved to intercept her, but one look from those silver eyes sent them scrambling back. This wasn't something you fought. This was something you worshipped or ran from. Elder Rothschild, Alara said, stopping at the base of the council platform. You orchestrated the Great Purge 23 years ago. You ordered the assassination of Luna bloodlines because you were afraid of their power. Afraid they'd expose corruption in the council. Afraid they'd return leadership to what it should be, rather than what you'd twisted it into. Rothschild's face had gone pale. You have no proof of these accusations. I have the memories of the earth itself, Alara countered. Do you know what ancient Lunas could do? We could commune with the territory, ask it what it had witnessed, what blood had been spilled, what secrets were buried. She pressed her glowing hand to the ground, and silver light spread outward like cracks in ice. Shall I ask this land what happened 23 years ago? Shall I make it show everyone here the orders you gave, the assassins you hired, the Luna bloodlines you systematically eliminated? This is slander, Rothschild shouted, but his voice shook. The ravings of a girl drunk on stolen power. Enough. The word cracked across the arena like a physical force. Alara's power surged, making the ground tremble, making everyone present feel the weight of something vast and terrible and utterly beyond their ability to control. I spent 23 years believing I was worthless, because people like you told me I was. I survived because my mother loved me enough to hide me from your murderous ambition. And I nearly died today because you were so afraid of what I represented that you tried to kill me in front of witnesses and call it justice. Her eyes blazed brighter. So no, Elder Rothschild, you don't get to speak anymore. You don't get to judge or condemn or twist truth into lies. Your time controlling this territory through fear and manipulation is over. She gestured, and silver light wrapped around Rothschild like chains, not painful, but completely immobilizing. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only stand frozen as evidence of his crimes. Alara turned to address the crowd, her Luna form still fully manifested. The throne didn't make a mistake. It recognized what this territory needed, not another puppet who would maintain broken systems, but someone who understood what it meant to be powerless in a world that crushed the vulnerable. Someone who would rebuild leadership based on justice rather than bloodline politics. She looked at the other council members. How many of you knew what Rothschild did? How many of you helped cover up the Great Purge? 3 of the 12 council members wouldn't meet her eyes. Their guilt was written clearly across their faces. I could destroy you all, Alara said softly. And the threat was all the more terrifying for its gentle delivery. I could tear down everything you've built and start over. The power flowing through me right now is enough to reshape this entire territory according to my will. She let that sink in. Let them feel the helplessness of facing something they couldn't fight or control. Then she stepped back, and the silver chains around Rothschild dissolved. Her Luna form began to recede. The massive celestial manifestation, compressing back into her normal human body. The glow faded from her eyes, leaving them their natural color, though something of that silver light remained, visible in certain angles. But I won't, Alara said in her own voice, smaller now but no less powerful. Because that would make me exactly like you. Someone who uses power to crush others, rather than lift them up. So here's what's going to happen instead. She walked to the center of the arena, standing where she'd nearly died minutes earlier. Elder Rothschild and the 3 council members who aided him will face trial for their crimes. Real trial, with evidence and witnesses, not the mockery of justice they subjected me to. If found guilty, they'll be exiled, not executed, because I won't start my leadership with blood but removed from power permanently. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Even those who'd been hostile to her seemed swayed by her mercy in the face of attempted murder. The remaining council will stay in their positions, Alara continued. But with reformed powers. No more trials designed to kill. No more persecution of those who don't fit perfect bloodline requirements. And most importantly, the council serves the territory, not the other way around. Leadership exists to protect people. All people. Not to maintain power for the elite. She turned, looking up at where Kieran stood at the arena's edge. And I'm claiming Alpha Kieran as my mate. Not because I need his protection anymore, but because I choose him. Because he chose me when it would have been easier to let me die. Because together, we can build something better than what existed before. Kieran vaulted over the arena wall, moving to stand beside her. In front of hundreds of witnesses, he took her hand, the gesture deliberate and public. I choose you, he said quietly, but his voice carried. Not the Luna candidate. Not the prophecy. You, Alara. The woman who survived everything they threw at her and came back stronger. Even though I'm terrifying now? Alara asked with a small smile. Especially because you're terrifying now. He pulled her closer, his forehead touching hers. Though you could have warned me about the whole becoming an 8-foot-tall celestial warrior thing, nearly gave me a heart attack. I nearly gave myself a heart attack, Alara admitted. Then louder, addressing the crowd. I know most of you don't want me. I know you think I'm unqualified, unworthy, that I rose above my station. And you're right. I am unqualified by your old standards. But maybe that's exactly what this territory needs. Someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless. Someone who won't forget that leadership is service, not domination. She looked across the sea of faces, some still hostile, some thoughtful, many simply shocked by everything that had happened. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to give me a chance to prove that the throne knew what it was doing. That sometimes, the most unlikely person is exactly the right one. A long moment of silence. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, someone began to clap, slowly at first, then joined by others. Not everyone there, were still plenty who looked disgusted or angry, but enough. Enough to suggest that maybe, possibly, she could win them over with time. Commander Thorne's voice boomed from the stands, all in favor of recognizing Alara, daughter of Luna Cassandra of the Northern Wildlands, as the rightful Luna of Silvercrest territory as chosen by the sacred throne. Hands rose throughout the crowd. Not a majority, not yet, but more than Alara had dared hope for. Motion carries, Thorne declared. We have our Luna. The remaining council members exchanged glances, calculating political futures, weighing options. Finally, the eldest among them, a woman named Margrave who'd been silent through the entire trial, stood. The council recognizes Luna Alara, she said formally, though I suspect she'll keep us on our toes for years to come. Something that might have been approval flickered in her eyes. About time someone shook things up around here. The ceremony that followed was hastily assembled but traditional. Alara stood before what remained of the legitimate council and spoke the oaths that bound her to the territory. Kieran stood beside her, speaking his own vows of partnership and protection. When they were finished, the silver light that had been dormant in the arena floor suddenly surged upward, wrapping around both of them in a visible display of the mate bond forming. It was beautiful and terrifying. And absolutely undeniable. One more thing, Alara said, as the light faded. She looked toward the palace, her expression distant, communing with something the others couldn't perceive. The throne is coming. What? Kieran asked. Alara smiled. I told you ancient Lunas can reshape territory. Well, if I'm going to rule, I should probably have my throne nearby. A rumbling sound echoed from the direction of the palace. People gasped as, In the distance, they could see the sacred Luna throne rising from the building. It floated through the air, carried by silver light, moving across the territory toward the arena as if pulled by invisible strings. The throne descended into the arena, settling gently on the platform Alara had created earlier. It glowed the moment it touched down, recognizing its Luna. Acknowledging her claim, Alara walked to it and sat, the picture of casual authority. The throne flared brighter, and everyone present felt it a pulse of power that traveled through the earth itself, marking the territory as claimed, protected, renewed. There, Alara said, looking perfectly comfortable on a throne that had rejected hundreds of candidates. Now, it's official. Kieran laughed, genuine amusement breaking through the tension. You just moved a 300-year-old sacred relic like it was furniture. It's my furniture, Alara pointed out. The throne and I have an understanding now. She patted the armrest affectionately. Besides, I got tired of walking to the palace every time I needed to sit on it. The absurdity of it, this former servant girl casually discussing rearranging sacred relics, was exactly what the territory needed. Proof that she wasn't going to be a traditional Luna. Proof that everything was going to change. As the crowd slowly dispersed, still processing everything they'd witnessed, Alara remained on her throne. The silver light had settled into a steady glow, warm and welcoming rather than intimidating. People approached cautiously, some to swear loyalty, others simply to see her up close now that she wasn't actively terrifying. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, broke away from her mother and ran up to the platform. "Are you really a Luna?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I really am," Alara confirmed gently. "But you were a servant. Mama said servants can't be Lunas." "I was a servant," Alara agreed. "And your mama was right, servants weren't supposed to become Lunas. But sometimes, the throne sees something that other people miss. Sometimes being different is exactly what makes you the right choice." The girl considered this seriously. "I'm different too. I can't shift right. Everyone says I'm broken." Alara's chest tightened. She knew that feeling intimately. She leaned forward, meeting the child's eyes. "You're not broken. You're just becoming something the world hasn't seen before. Like me. And you know what? That's going to be your greatest strength." The girl smiled, bright and hopeful, and ran back to her mother looking like someone had just given her the moon itself. And maybe Alara had the gift of believing she could be more than others said she was. As the afternoon wore on and the crowd thinned, Kieran climbed onto the platform and settled on the throne's armrest beside Alara. "So, you're officially Luna now. You passed their trials, manifested impossible power, exposed corruption, and literally moved the throne to suit your convenience. How does it feel?" Alara leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, and she was becoming aware of how much the transformation had cost her. "Terrifying," she admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing. I just made promises I might not be able to keep. I claimed authority over people who still think I'm a fraud, and I apparently have powers I barely understand that could go catastrophically wrong at any moment. So, normal new Luna anxiety. Is it? Probably not. Most Lunas don't reshape terrain or manifest celestial warrior forms." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "But most Lunas also didn't survive what you survived. Didn't fight as hard. Didn't show the kind of mercy you showed today when you could have destroyed everyone who hurt you." Alara turned to look at him. "I wanted to. For a moment, when I had all that power, I wanted to make them all pay for every insult, every rejection, every moment they made me feel worthless. But you didn't. No. Because that would have meant they were right about me all along, that I was just a servant pretending to be something greater. I had to prove I could be better than they were." She smiled tiredly. "Even if it was really tempting to do some smiting." Kieran laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Save the smiting for actual enemies. You're going to need it because this isn't over. Rothschild had allies beyond the council. There are other territories watching to see if we're weak. And there are still plenty of people in Silvercrest who think you stole a position you didn't earn." "I know." Alara looked out across the emptying arena, at the territory she'd just claimed. "But I've got something they don't expect." "What's that?" "Nothing left to lose." She stood, the throne releasing her easily now that it recognized her completely. "I spent 23 years invisible. Now everyone's watching. so I might as well give them something worth seeing. She descended from the platform, Kieran following, and together they walked through the arena toward their new life. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding the council, establishing her authority, learning to control powers she barely understood. But tonight, and for the first time in her entire life, she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 9. The Claiming. 3 months had passed since the trials. Alara stood in the rebuilt throne room she'd insisted on renovations, opening the space to include windows that let in natural light and removing the oppressive darkness that had characterized the old council's rule. The sacred Luna throne sat on its dais, glowing softly as it always did now in her presence. But the room around it had been transformed into something welcoming rather than intimidating. Today was the first open council session where any member of the territory, regardless of rank or bloodline, could bring concerns directly to leadership. It was a radical change from the old system, where only nobles had access to power, and predictably, the throne room was packed. Alara sat on her throne wearing practical clothes rather than elaborate ceremonial robes, another small rebellion against tradition that made the remaining Old Guard council members wince. Kieran stood beside her, his position as Alpha Consort now formalized, presenting a united front of leadership. Next, petitioner, council member Margrave called. The old woman had become Alara's unlikely ally, embracing the reforms with surprising enthusiasm. Apparently, she'd been waiting decades for someone to shake up the system. A young man stepped forward, nervous, dressed in working clothes, clearly unused to being in the throne room. My name is Thomas. I work in the southern mines. We've had 3 cave-ins this season, and the mine owners refuse to make repairs. They say it's too expensive, that we're expendable. Murmurs rippled through the noble families in attendance. This was exactly the kind of complaint they'd prefer remain hidden, the ugly reality of how their wealth was built. How many injured? Alara asked, her voice carrying clearly. 7, seriously, 2 dead. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. We've asked for safety improvements for months. They ignored us. So I'm here, asking you, do servant workers matter to this territory or not? It was a test. Everyone in the room knew it. How Alara responded would define her entire approach to leadership. They matter, Alara said firmly. She looked directly at the mine owner, Lord Pemberton, who sat among the nobles looking distinctly uncomfortable. Lord Pemberton, you have 2 weeks to implement the safety improvements your workers have requested. I'll be sending inspectors, real ones, not people you've bribed, to verify the work is done properly. With respect, Luna Alara, Pemberton said carefully. The cost of such improvements would be astronomical. It could bankrupt the operation. Then perhaps you shouldn't have spent quite so much on that new villa I noticed being built last month. Alara's tone was pleasant, but her eyes were steel. Funny how you can afford luxury estates but not safe working conditions for the people who generate your wealth. Pemberton's face reddened. You can't simply dictate. I absolutely can. I'm Luna. It's literally my job to protect the territory's people, all of them, not just the ones with fancy titles. She stood, moving to the edge of the dais. Here's what's going to happen. The improvements get made. The costs come out of your profits, not your workers' wages. And if I hear about any retaliation against workers who speak up about safety concerns, you'll find yourself explaining to this council why you should keep your mining licenses at all. The threat was clear. Pemberton looked like he wanted to argue but ultimately nodded stiffly and retreated. Thomas, meanwhile, looked like someone had just handed him the world. Thank you, Luna, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You don't know what this means. I do, actually, Alara interrupted gently. I spent 23 years being one of those expendable workers everyone ignores. I know exactly what it means to finally be heard. She smiled. And Thomas? If those improvements don't happen, you come straight back here. No one gets to ignore safety because it's inconvenient. After Thomas left, the petitions continued, a dispute over water rights that Alara resolved by implementing a sharing schedule, a complaint about predatory lending practices that resulted in her establishing a territory fund for emergency loans at fair rates, a request for better education access for non-noble children that had her immediately creating a committee to design a public school system. Every decision was practical. focused on helping ordinary people rather than maintaining elite power structures. And every decision made the old guard nobles increasingly nervous about what else she might change. When the session finally ended hours later, Alara slumped back on her throne, exhausted. "Is it always this much?" she asked Margrave. "Only because you actually listen to people," the old woman said with a dry smile. "Previous Lunas would have dismissed half those petitions without hearing them. You engage with every single one. It's admirable but exhausting. Someone has to care." Alara rubbed her temples. "Though I'm starting to understand why rulers get callous. It's overwhelming to feel responsible for everyone's problems." Kieran approached once the throne room had cleared, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might need this." He handed her one, and settled on the throne's armrest, his customary position during these sessions. "You're a lifesaver." Alara sipped the tea gratefully. "How did the patrol reports look today?" "Eastern Territory is still testing our borders, but nothing serious. They're trying to gauge if the leadership change made us weak." His expression darkened slightly. "We did catch someone trying to cross into our territory illegally, though. Claims to be from the Northern Wildlands." Alara's head snapped up. "The Northern Wildlands? That's your mother's territory, I know." Kieran set his tea aside. "The person is being held in the guest quarters, not the cells. I thought you'd want to meet them yourself." Alara's heart raced. 3 months as Luna, and this was the first contact from her mother's homeland. The territory that had been destroyed during the Great Purge, scattered to the winds. Take me there, now. The guest quarters were comfortable but guarded. Alara entered to find a woman perhaps in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that held the weight of survival. She stood when Alara entered, and something in her expression shifted, shock giving way to tears. "By the goddess," the woman whispered. "You look just like her. Like Cassandra." Alara's throat tightened. "You knew my mother?" "Knew her? I served her. I was one of her personal guards before." The woman's voice broke. "Before Rothschild's assassins came. Most of us died that night. A few escaped. We've been scattered, hiding, waiting to see if any of Cassandra's bloodline survived." She dropped to one knee in a gesture of formal respect. "My name is Sienna. And I'm here to tell you that you're not alone, Luna Alara. There are others, 17 of us total survivors of the Northern Wildlands who've been searching for Cassandra's daughter for 23 years. The implications crashed over Alara. "You've been looking for me this whole time? Your mother made us swear an oath. If anything happened to her, we were to find you, protect you, ensure her sacrifice wasn't for nothing." Sienna rose, her expression fierce. "When word spread about a foundling Luna in Silvercrest who manifested ancient power, we knew it had to be you." Kieran moved closer to Alara, a steadying presence. "Why come forward now? Why not 3 months ago, when she first claimed the throne?" "Because we needed to be sure she'd survive," Sienna said bluntly. "Rothschild's network was extensive. We had to wait until his execution." "Exile," Alara corrected. "I exiled him. Not executed. Exiled. Exiled him. Not executed." Sienna's eyebrows rose. "Exile? That monster orchestrated the deaths of hundreds, and you showed him mercy?" "I showed him consequences," Alara said firmly. "But I won't start my rule with blood. That's not who I am." Something flickered across Sienna's face, approval mixed with concern. "You're more like your mother than you know. She was merciful too. It's what got her killed." The words hit harder than intended. Alara felt Kieran's hand on her back, grounding her. "Tell me about her. Please. I don't even know what she looked like. What she was like." Sienna's expression softened. "She was brilliant, powerful, kind in ways that made people want to follow her, not out of fear, but genuine loyalty." She pulled something from her pocket, a small locket on a silver chain. "She asked me to give you this if I ever found you. Said you'd need it when the time came." Alara took the locket with shaking hands. It was warm, almost alive, humming with faint magic. She opened it to find 2 things: a miniature portrait of a woman who did indeed look remarkably like Alara, and a lock of silver-white hair bound with thread. "That's moon-blessed hair," Sienna explained. From the night your mother became Luna. It holds her essence, her power. She said it would help you complete your transformation when you were ready. Complete my transformation? Alara looked up sharply. What does that mean? You've accessed your Luna powers, but they're still raw, unstable. You survived the awakening because you're strong, but you haven't fully integrated them yet. Sienna gestured to the locket. Your mother's essence can guide you, help you understand what you're becoming. It's difficult to explain. You'll understand when you use it. Alara closed the locket carefully, feeling its weight settle against her palm. You said there are 17 survivors. What do they want? To serve you, if you'll have us. To rebuild what was lost. To ensure the Northern Wildlands bloodline continues. Sienna hesitated. And to help you prepare for what's coming. The air in the room suddenly felt colder. What's coming? Rothschild wasn't working alone. The Great Purge was orchestrated by a coalition powerful people from multiple territories who feared what the ancient Lunas represented. They thought they'd eliminated the bloodline completely. But now you've emerged, proven your power publicly, and they're terrified. Sienna's expression was grim. They'll come for you, Alara. Maybe not tomorrow or next month, but they will come. And when they do, you'll need more than just Silvercrest's forces to survive. Kieran's hand tightened on Alara's shoulder. You're talking about war. I'm talking about survival. The same forces that destroyed the Northern Wildlands won't hesitate to try again with Silvercrest. Sienna looked between them. But you have advantages your mother didn't. You have allies. You have the throne's full recognition. And you have 17 warriors who know how to fight the kind of shadow war that's coming. Alara looked at Kieran, seeing her own concerns reflected in his eyes. They'd known this peace was temporary, that consolidating power in Silvercrest was just the first step, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real. I'll accept your service, Alara said finally. But not as servants. As advisors, partners in rebuilding what was lost. If we're going to face what's coming, we do it together. As equals. Sienna smiled, the first genuine smile since entering the room. Your mother would have said the same thing. Yes, Luna Alara, we accept your terms. That evening, Alara stood in the private gardens behind the Luna chambers, holding her mother's locket. Kieran had wanted to stay with her, but she'd asked for solitude for this. Whatever using the locket entailed. She needed to face it alone. She opened it, looking at the portrait again. Her mother's face was serene, captured in a moment of peace that probably didn't reflect her actual life. And the lock of moon-blessed hair glowed softly in the twilight. I wish I'd known you, Alara whispered. I wish you'd survived long enough to tell me who I was, what I was meant to become. The hair began to glow brighter, responding to her voice. Alara carefully removed it from the locket, and the moment it touched her palm, the world shifted. She found herself standing in that silver space again, the place between worlds where the moon goddess had spoken to her during the trials. But this time, she wasn't alone. Her mother stood before her. Not the portrait version, the real woman, looking tired and desperate and achingly young. She wore traveling clothes, and in her arms was a bundle Alara recognized with a jolt. Herself, as an infant. This is a memory, Alara realized. The night you left me. The worst night of my life. Her mother Cassandra said, her voice breaking. I've replayed it thousands of times, wondering if there was another way. But there wasn't. They were coming. I could feel them closing in. And I had to choose between keeping you with me and watching you die, or giving you away and hoping you'd survive. Alara watched as Memory Cassandra knelt in the snow at the edge of Silvercrest territory, placing the infant carefully beneath the tree. Watched as she pressed the pendant against the baby's chest, the mark of the moon blessed, hidden until it was needed. I sealed your power, Cassandra said, standing beside present Alara, as they both watched the scene play out. Locked away everything that made you a target. I thought if I could make you invisible, make you seem powerless, you might survive long enough to awaken when the time was right. It worked, Alara said softly. I survived. But it cost me 23 years of believing I was broken. Worthless, not enough. I know. Cassandra's voice was thick with grief. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to give you a normal life. Not this burden. But fate had other plans. The memory shifted. Now they stood in a grand hall, the Northern Wildlands throne room, before it was destroyed. Cassandra sat on a throne that looked like silver crests but carved from different stone. She looked regal, powerful, at peace. "This is how I remember you," the real Cassandra said. "Before everything fell apart. Before I knew what was coming." "What happened?" Alara asked. Sienna said there was a coalition, that they targeted Luna bloodlines specifically. They were afraid of us, of what we represented. Cassandra gestured around the throne room. The ancient Lunas didn't just lead their territories. They could communicate across distances, could unite scattered packs, could reshape entire regions according to the moon goddess's will. We were too powerful, too incorruptible. We couldn't be bribed or threatened into maintaining systems that crushed the vulnerable. She looked at Alara with eyes that held infinite sadness. So they decided we needed to disappear. A coordinated strike across multiple territories, assassinations disguised as accidents, territories destroyed and blamed on natural disasters, bloodlines erased from history. They almost succeeded. But I survived. You survived. And now you're everything they feared. Cassandra reached out, her translucent hand passing through Alara's cheek in a gesture that should have been comforting. "You're stronger than I was. You had to be to survive what you survived. You're going to face challenges I never imagined. But you're not alone anymore." The memory shifted again. This time they stood in the Silvercrest arena, watching Alara's transformation during the trials, the moment she'd surrendered to the moon goddess and become something more. "This is what I always hoped you'd become," Cassandra said, watching her daughter's Luna form manifest. "Not powerful because you inherited it, but powerful because you earned it, because you chose it. Because you understood what power should be used for. To protect people," Alara said quietly. "To give voice to the voiceless. To build something better than what came before." "Yes," Cassandra smiled, proud and sad in equal measure. "And that's why you'll succeed where I failed. Because you never forgot what it was like to be powerless. You'll never become the kind of leader who uses authority to crush rather than lift." The silver space began to fade. The memory was ending. The magic in her mother's moon-blessed hair depleting itself to deliver this final message. "Wait," Alara said desperately. "Don't go. I have so many questions." "You have everything you need," Cassandra said, her form becoming translucent. "You have allies, power, love, and most importantly, you have yourself, the woman you became through adversity. That's worth more than any bloodline or inherited ability." She was almost gone now, just a whisper of silver light. "I'm proud of you, daughter. More proud than you can possibly imagine. Live the life I couldn't. Build the world I dreamed of. And remember, you were never a mistake. You were always exactly who you needed to be." Then she was gone, and Alara stood alone in the garden again, tears streaming down her face. The lock of moon-blessed hair had disintegrated completely, its magic spent delivering that final message from a mother who'd loved her enough to let her go. Alara clutched the locket to her chest and let herself cry for the mother she'd never known, for the childhood stolen by necessity, for the woman she might have been in a different world, but also for the woman she'd become, the Luna who'd survived impossible odds and emerged stronger. She felt Kieran before she heard him, his presence a familiar warmth approaching from the chambers. He didn't speak, just wrapped his arms around her from behind and held her while she wept. "She loved me," Alara finally said, her voice raw. "Even though she gave me away. She loved me enough to sacrifice everything." "I know," Kieran murmured against her hair. "That kind of love leaves marks. You carried it with you even when you didn't know where it came from." They stood in the garden as stars emerged overhead, holding each other against the weight of past and future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integrating the Northern Wildlands survivors, preparing for threats from the coalition, continuing to reform Silvercrest's systems. But tonight, Alara allowed herself to simply be held, to be seen, to be loved by someone who chose her, not because prophecy demanded it, but because he genuinely wanted to. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing beside me, for not running when you realized how complicated this would get." Kieran turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You think I'd run? After watching you survive trials designed to kill you, manifest impossible power, and choose mercy over vengeance?" He shook his head, something like awe in his expression. "Alara, you're the most terrifying and wonderful person I've ever met. There's nowhere else I'd rather be than right here, watching you reshape the world, even though I have no idea what I'm doing. Especially because of that, you're not constrained by tradition or precedent. You're building something new, and it's beautiful even when it's messy." His thumb brushed away a remaining tear. "Besides, I promise to stand beside you. I don't break promises." Alara rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and grateful, and full of all the things she couldn't quite put into words. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "We're going to face a war," she said quietly. "The coalition that killed my mother will come for me eventually. Let them come." Kieran's voice was steel wrapped in warmth. "They're used to facing Lunas who were raised in power, who didn't know how to fight dirty. But you learned to survive when you had nothing. You know how to fight battles that can't be won through force alone." He smiled. "I almost pity them." "Almost? Well, I do want to watch you terrify them a little." His expression turned serious. "But we'll face it together. You're not your mother, alone and hunted. You have allies. You have power. You have a territory that's learning to love you. And you have me. For whatever that's worth." "It's worth everything," Alara said honestly. They walked back to the chambers together, hands linked, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, full of enemies who wanted her dead and challenges she couldn't predict. But for the first time in her life, Alara wasn't facing it alone. She had people who chose to stand with her. She had power she was learning to control. She had a purpose bigger than mere survival. She had become exactly what the throne had recognized that first day when she'd sat down, exhausted and desperate, never imagining her life was about to change forever. She had become Luna, and she was just getting started. Chapter 10. Epilogue. The Luna who rose from nothing. 6 months later, spring had arrived in Silvercrest territory with an exuberance that felt symbolic. Alara stood on the balcony of the rebuilt council chambers, watching the gardens below transform into riots of color. Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion, not just natural growth, but a response to the territory itself, healing under new leadership. The land remembered what it meant to have a true Luna, and it was celebrating. Below, children played near the fountain that had once been reserved exclusively for nobles. Now it was public space, and watching servants' children splash alongside highborn heirs felt like the most natural thing in the world. It hadn't been 6 months ago. But Alara had been relentless in breaking down barriers that served no purpose except maintaining artificial hierarchies. "You're smiling," Kieran's voice came from behind her. "That's good. You've been too serious lately." Alara turned to face her mate. The words still sent a small thrill through her whenever she thought it. Kieran stood in the doorway wearing training clothes, his hair damp from practice with the Northern Wildlands warriors. The 17 survivors Sienna had brought had integrated seamlessly into Silvercrest's forces, bringing combat techniques and strategic knowledge that had elevated their entire military. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," Alara said. 6 months ago, I was a servant who accidentally sat on a throne. Now I'm watching the territory transform into something I barely imagined possible." Kieran crossed to stand beside her, his arms sliding around her waist, in that casual intimacy they'd developed. "You did more than imagine it. You built it. Every reformed law, every open door, every person who finally has a voice, that's you." "That's us," Alara corrected. "I couldn't have done any of it without you. Without Margrave and Sienna, and everyone who chose to stand with me instead of clinging to the old ways." "True. But you were the catalyst." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Speaking of which, the new school opens tomorrow. The public education system you fought so hard for. That's gonna cement your legacy more than any battle." Alara felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with magic. The school opened to all children, regardless of bloodline or status. Teaching not just basic skills but critical thinking and leadership had been her passion project. It represented everything she wanted the territory to become, a place where potential mattered more than birth. "I'm terrified it won't work," she admitted. "That we'll discover I was naive to think education could really change anything. Then you'll adjust and try something different. That's what you do, you don't give up when things are hard." Kieran turned her to face him fully. "But I don't think you're being naive. I think you understand something the old leadership never did. Power built on keeping people ignorant and desperate is fragile. Real strength comes from elevating everyone, not crushing them. A knock on the door interrupted their moment. Margrave entered without waiting for permission, a habit Alara had learned to accept from the old council member. She claimed her age entitled her to skip formalities. "Luna, we have visitors," Margrave announced. "From the Western Territory. They're requesting an audience." Alara and Kieran exchanged glances. The Western Territory had been neutral so far, neither supporting nor opposing Alara's rise. A visit could mean many things: alliance, threat assessment, or something else entirely. "Bring them to the throne room," Alara said. "We'll receive them formally." 20 minutes later, Alara sat on the sacred Luna throne, which still glowed steadily in her presence, a constant reminder of her legitimacy with Kieran standing beside her. Sienna and 3 other Northern Wildlands warriors positioned themselves strategically around the room, ready for threats even in supposedly peaceful meetings. The Western delegation entered, 5 wolves, led by a woman who carried herself with the confidence of someone used to authority. She was perhaps 40, with gray-streaked auburn hair and eyes that assessed everything with sharp intelligence. "Luna Alara," the woman said, stopping at a respectful distance. "I am Alpha Cordelia of the Western Territory. I come bearing an offer." "I'm listening," Alara said carefully. Offers from neighboring territories were rarely simple. The Western Territory would like to propose an alliance. Trade agreements, mutual defense pact, open borders for citizens seeking opportunities in either territory. Cordelia's gaze was direct, unflinching. "We've been watching your reforms with great interest. What you're building here: education for all, protection for workers, justice that doesn't favor the wealthy. It's revolutionary. It's just treating people like they matter," Alara said. "That shouldn't be revolutionary. But it is, and it's making waves across multiple territories. People are talking about Silvercrest, about the servant girl who became Luna, and actually changed things instead of just maintaining the status quo." Cordelia smiled slightly. "Some territories are terrified of you. They see you as a threat to their power structures, but others, like mine, see opportunity." "Opportunity for what?" "To build something better. To prove that territories can thrive without crushing their vulnerable populations. To create a coalition of leadership that actually serves rather than dominates." Cordelia took a step closer, her expression earnest. "The old ways are dying, Luna Alara. Everyone can feel it. The question is whether we cling to what's familiar or embrace what could be. I choose to embrace it. And I'm hoping you'll ally with me." Alara felt Kieran's hand on her shoulder, a silent communication. This was her decision, but he supported whatever she chose. She looked at Cordelia, using the enhanced senses her Luna powers provided to read the woman's sincerity. No deception, no hidden malice, just genuine hope for something different. "An alliance requires trust," Alara said slowly. "The last time territories coordinated, it was to hunt Luna bloodlines. How do I know this isn't a trap?" "You don't, not completely." Cordelia's honesty was refreshing. "But consider this. If I wanted to harm you, I could have joined the coalition that's still plotting against you. Instead, I'm here, publicly declaring my intention to stand with you. That makes me a target too. Anyone who allies with you becomes an enemy of those who fear what you represent. The coalition Sienna warned me about," Alara said. "You know about them? Everyone knows about them, even if they don't speak the name openly. The Preservation Council, they call themselves territory leaders who believe the old ways must be maintained at any cost. They see you as an existential threat." Cordelia's expression turned grim. "And they're not wrong. If you succeed, if you prove that territories can prosper without the old hierarchies, their power base crumbles. They'll come for you eventually. When they do, you'll need allies." Kieran spoke up. "What do you gain from this alliance, besides putting a target on your back?" "Hope," Cordelia said simply. "I have a daughter, Luna Alara. She's 12 years old, and she can't shift properly. Under the old systems, that would make her worthless, a failure, an embarrassment. But watching you rise despite the same flaw has given her hope that maybe she can still matter, that maybe being different isn't the same as being broken." Her voice cracked slightly. You've given my daughter something I couldn't. The belief that she has a future. For that alone, I'd stand with you. The political benefits are just bonuses. Alara felt something shift in her chest. She'd known abstractly that her story was spreading, that people beyond Silvercrest were watching. But hearing how it had affected one specific child made it real in a way statistics never could. Bring your daughter here, Alara said suddenly. Let her attend our new school when it opens. Let her see firsthand that being different is exactly what can make someone extraordinary. Cordelia's eyes widened. You'd do that? Of course. That's what this is all about, creating space for people who don't fit the mold. Alara stood from her throne, descending the dais to stand eye level with Cordelia. And yes, I'll accept your alliance. Not just for strategic reasons, but because I believe what you said. The old ways are dying. We can either cling to them and die with them, or build something new. I choose building. She extended her hand. Cordelia grasped it firmly, and the moment their hands touched, both women's Luna marks flared with light. Alara's silver, Cordelia's a deep amber. The marks recognized each other, acknowledged the alliance between bloodlines, sealed the pact in a way that was binding on a magical level. The Western Territory stands with Silvercrest, Cordelia said formally. Your enemies are mine. Your cause is mine. Together, we build something worth defending. Together, Alara agreed. That evening, Alara walked through the territory alone, something she did periodically despite Kieran's concerns about security. She needed to see her people without the formal barriers of throne rooms and official visits. Needed to understand how the changes were really affecting everyday lives. She wore simple clothes and kept her Luna aura muted, appearing as just another citizen walking through the market district. Vendors called out their wares. Children ran past, laughing. A group of young adults debated politics outside a tavern, their conversation passionate but not fearful. This was what she'd wanted, a territory where people felt free to live, to speak, to simply be without constant fear of authority. Alara stopped outside the building that would become the school, running her hand along the newly repaired walls. Tomorrow, children from every background would enter these doors as equals. Some would struggle with reading, others with numbers, but all would be taught that their potential mattered more than their parentage. Nervous about tomorrow, Alara turned to find Priestess Mara emerging from the shadows. The ancient woman had become a semi-regular presence in Silvercrest, offering guidance when Alara struggled with particularly difficult Luna magic. She appeared and disappeared at will, which was disconcerting but also strangely comforting. Terrified, Alara admitted. What if I'm wrong? What if education isn't enough to change centuries of ingrained hierarchy? Then you fail, learn, adjust, and try again. Mara moved to stand beside her, both of them looking at the school. But you're not wrong. Knowledge is the most dangerous weapon against oppression. Those who benefit from keeping others ignorant will fight you, but those you educate will become unstoppable. The coalition Cordelia mentioned, they'll see this as a threat. They already do. You've been a threat since the moment you survived your trials. Mara's clouded eyes somehow held infinite perception. But here's what they don't understand. You're not just one Luna who can be eliminated. You're a movement, an idea. And ideas are much harder to kill than people. Alara absorbed that, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more heavily. I never wanted to be a movement. I just wanted to survive. To maybe make things slightly better. The best leaders rarely seek power. They're thrust into it, and do their best despite never feeling adequate. Mara's weathered hand patted Alara's arm. You doubt yourself constantly, which is good. The moment you stop questioning your decisions is the moment you become what you fought against. How do you always know exactly what I need to hear? I'm very old and have seen many Lunas rise and fall. You're far from the first to struggle with the burden. But Mara smiled. Though you might be the first to wear that burden while still maintaining genuine empathy. Most Luna lose that eventually. I don't think you will. Why not? Because you remember. You remember what it felt like to be powerless, to be invisible, to be told you don't matter. That memory is your greatest strength that keeps you grounded even as you wield enormous power. Mara turned to face her fully. Never forget who you were, Alara. The servant girl who sat on the wrong throne will always be the foundation of the Luna you become. The priestess began to fade into shadows, her form becoming translucent. "Mara, wait," Alara called out. "The future is coming faster than you expect," Mara's voice echoed. "The coalition won't wait much longer, but neither will your allies. Trust in the connections you've built. Trust in the woman you've become. And remember, the throne didn't choose you despite your flaws. It chose you because of them." Then she was gone, leaving Alara alone outside the school with a head full of warnings and encouragement in equal measure. Alara returned to the Luna chambers to find Kieran waiting, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, and the tone made her stomach clench. "What happened?" "Scout reports from the eastern border. Multiple territories are amassing forces, not enough for immediate invasion but clearly coordinating. The coalition is moving faster than we anticipated." He handed her a map marked with troop positions. "They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses." Alara studied the map, her tactical training from the past 6 months kicking in. "They think the alliance with Western Territory makes us vulnerable, that we're spread too thin trying to coordinate with new allies." "Are we?" "No. Cordelia's forces are well trained, and combining our resources makes both territories stronger." Alara traced possible attack routes on the map. "But they don't know that yet. They're operating on assumptions about how alliances usually work, where everyone guards their own borders and coordination is slow." Understanding dawned in Kieran's eyes. "But you've been integrating forces. The Northern Wildlands warriors training with our troops. The shared tactical sessions with Western Territory representatives. You've been preparing for coordinated defense." "I've been preparing for war," Alara corrected quietly. "I knew it was coming. The question was never if, but when." She set down the map and moved to the window, looking out over the territory she'd sworn to protect. "They'll attack soon, probably before summer, while they think we're still establishing the alliance. Are we ready?" Alara thought about the past 6 months. The reforms implemented, the allies gained, the power she'd learned to control, the people who'd chosen to stand with her despite the risks. She thought about her mother's sacrifice, about the prophecy written on ancient walls, about the servant girl who'd stumbled into destiny and somehow survived. "No," she said honestly. "We're not ready. We're outnumbered, facing enemies with more resources and experience. We should fail." But she turned to face Kieran, and something in her expression made him straighten. "But they're making the same mistake everyone's made about me from the beginning. They see what I lack: formal training, noble bloodline, traditional authority, and assume that makes me weak. They don't see what I have, which is people who fight because they believe in something, not because they're ordered to. A territory that's tasted equality and won't go back to oppression. Allies who chose this alliance out of genuine hope rather than political calculation." She moved closer to him, her hands finding his. "And most importantly, I know how to survive impossible odds. I've been doing it my entire life." Kieran pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest. "Promise me you'll be careful when this war comes. Promise you won't sacrifice yourself trying to save everyone." "I can't promise that." Alara's voice was muffled against his shirt. "I'm Luna. Protecting the territory means sometimes putting myself at risk. Then promise me you'll come back, that when the fighting ends, you'll still be here, because I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't do this without you." Alara pulled back enough to look up at him. "You could. You're stronger than you think. But you won't have to. Because I'm not done yet." She rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "The prophecy said I'd restore what was lost or watch everything fall to shadow. I choose restoration, which means surviving long enough to build what comes next." "What does come next? After we survive the war?" Alara thought about the school opening tomorrow, about Cordelia's daughter finding hope in her story, about children playing in gardens that used to be restricted, about the world she was building one stubborn reform at a time. "Everything," she said simply. "We rebuild the Northern Wildlands. We expand the alliance to other territories. We create a coalition based on mutual support rather than mutual fear. We prove that power doesn't have to corrupt, that leadership can serve rather than dominate, that being different is strength rather than weakness." She smiled. "We change everything about how territories function. No big deal." Kieran laughed, genuine, surprised, full of the love he'd never quite learned to hide. No big deal. Just completely revolutionizing pack society while fighting a war against people who want us dead. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds dramatic. It is dramatic. You're dramatic. This whole situation is absurdly dramatic. But he was still smiling, still holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. And somehow I believe you'll actually do it. Survive the war, change everything, build something worth the fight. We'll do it, Alara corrected. Together, he agreed. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the school's opening ceremony. Alara stood on the platform erected for the occasion, looking out at hundreds of faces, parents with their children, skeptical nobles who'd attended out of obligation, and genuinely hopeful people who saw this as the beginning of something transformative. 6 months ago, Alara began, her voice magically amplified to reach everyone. I was a servant. I cleaned these halls, served these families, existed as invisible support for people whose lives mattered more than mine. She paused, letting that sink in. Today, I'm Luna. But more importantly, today I'm standing here telling you that every child, regardless of their parents' status, their bloodline, their ability to shift properly, deserves the chance to learn, to grow, to become something extraordinary. She gestured to the school building behind her. This isn't just a school. It's a promise. A promise that in Silvercrest territory, potential matters more than birth. That knowledge is available to all, not hoarded by the few. That we measure success not by maintaining old hierarchies, but by lifting everyone higher. In the crowd, Alara saw Thomas the mine worker who'd petitioned for safety improvements. His children stood beside him, scrubbed clean and wearing new clothes, looking at the school with wonder. She saw Cordelia and her daughter, the 12-year-old girl who couldn't shift properly but now had hope. She saw former servants and current nobles standing side by side, united in curiosity about this radical experiment. Some of you think this will fail, Alara continued honestly. Some think I'm naive to believe education can change centuries of tradition. You might be right, but I'd rather try and fail than never try at all. I'd rather build something worth defending than maintain something that crushes people. She stepped down from the platform, moving to the school's entrance where the first students waited. Among them was a small girl she recognized, the 6-year-old who'd approached her months ago, asking if servants could really become Lunas, admitting she couldn't shift right, and everyone said she was broken. Alara knelt to the child's level, ready to learn. The girl nodded, eyes wide with excitement and fear in equal measure. Good, because you're going to do amazing things. Alara stood and opened the doors wide. Welcome to the beginning of everything. 1 year after the throne glowed. The war came 3 months after the school opened. Exactly as predicted. The coalition, calling themselves the Preservation Council, launched coordinated attacks on Silvercrest and Western Territory simultaneously, confident they could crush the rebellion before it spread. They were wrong. The war lasted 4 brutal months. Battles were fought on multiple fronts. Lives were lost. Territory was gained and lost and gained again. There were moments when failure seemed inevitable, when the coalition's superior numbers threatened to overwhelm them completely. But Alara's alliance held. The Northern Wildlands warriors' unconventional tactics confused enemies used to traditional warfare. Silvercrest's newly empowered citizens fought with the desperation of people defending something they'd never had before: genuine hope. Western Territory's forces coordinated seamlessly, proving that alliances based on shared values were stronger than those built on political expediency. And Alara herself became something the coalition hadn't anticipated, a symbol worth dying for. Soldiers who'd never met her fought harder knowing she existed. Citizens who'd been taught they didn't matter suddenly discovered they did. The servant girl who'd become Luna represented the possibility that anyone could rise, that systems could change, that the future didn't have to mirror the past. The turning point came at the Battle of Silver Ridge, where Alara manifested her full Luna form in front of both armies. The sight of her 8 feet of celestial power, wrapped in moonlight, commanding not through fear but through undeniable authority, shattered the coalition's morale. Several of their member territories defected immediately, unwilling to fight against something that felt divinely ordained. The war ended not with a grand final battle, but with negotiations. The coalition splintered as member territories recognized they couldn't win against an idea whose time had come. Some surrendered, others retreated. A few stubbornly refused to concede but lacked the resources to continue fighting. Peace didn't arrive all at once. It crept in gradually: ceasefires, treaties, tentative alliances. The work of rebuilding would take years. But for the first time in centuries, multiple territories coordinated not to consolidate power, but to actually improve their citizens' lives. Now, 1 year after accidentally sitting on the sacred Luna throne, Alara stood in a rebuilt throne room, addressing representatives from 7 territories. 7 territories that had chosen to join what they were calling the Luna Coalition, an alliance based on shared principles of education, equality, and leadership that served rather than dominated. "We're calling this the Treaty of Shared Skies," Alara explained, gesturing to the document laid out before them. "It establishes free movement between member territories, mutual defense obligations, shared educational standards, and protections for workers regardless of territory. It's not perfect, we'll need to adjust as we discover what works and what doesn't, but it's a foundation." Alpha Cordelia spoke up. "The old guard territories are calling this radical, dangerous, a threat to tradition." "They're right," Alara said simply. "It is all those things. But tradition that crushes people doesn't deserve preservation. Sometimes the radical choice is the only moral one." She looked around at the assembled leaders, people who'd chosen reform over comfort, who'd risked their positions to stand with her, who believed territories could be better than they'd been. "My mother died believing the Luna bloodlines could unite territories into something stronger than they were separately. The coalition that killed her thought they'd eliminated that possibility forever." Alara's hands rested on the treaty document. "But here we are, 7 territories, multiple Luna bloodlines that survived, building exactly what they feared most: cooperation based on genuine shared values." "To Luna Cassandra's dream," Cordelia said, raising her glass, "made real by her daughter. To new beginnings," another Alpha added. They signed the treaty one by one, their marks glowing with power as magic sealed the agreements. This was more than politics, it was a fundamental restructuring of how territories related to each other and their citizens. When the ceremony ended and the representatives dispersed, Alara found herself alone in the throne room with just Kieran and the gently glowing throne. "Tired?" Kieran asked, moving to wrap his arms around her from behind. "Exhausted," Alara admitted, leaning back against him. "But the good kind. The kind that comes from actually accomplishing something rather than just surviving. You've accomplished more in 1 year than most Lunas do in lifetimes. We've accomplished it. I keep telling you none of this happens without you. Without Sienna and Margrave and Cordelia and everyone else who chose to stand with me. True, but you were the catalyst." He pressed a kiss to her neck. "The servant girl who sat in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe exactly the right place at the right time and changed everything." Alara turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't sat down that day? If my feet hadn't hurt, or if I'd chosen a different place to rest?" "Every day," Kieran admitted. "And every day, I'm grateful you did. Because meeting you, standing beside you, watching you become this incredible force for change, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. Even with the war, the assassination attempts, the constant political battles, especially with all that, because it means what we're building matters enough to fight for." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "You asked me once if I was ready to stand beside someone the entire council wanted dead. Remember?" "I remember. I'm more ready now than I was then. Because I've seen what standing beside you creates. I've seen territories transform. I've seen people discover they matter. I've seen the impossible become inevitable because you refuse to accept, that's how it's always been, as a valid reason for injustice." Alara felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, born of being truly seen and valued. "I love you," she said simply. "For choosing me, for staying, for believing I could be more than what everyone else said I was. I love you for surviving," Kieran said, "for maintaining kindness when the world showed you none, for becoming powerful without becoming cruel, for being exactly who you are, flaws and doubts and stubborn determination and all." They stood together in the throne room as evening light painted everything gold, holding each other like anchors in a still turbulent world. The war was over. But the work of building what came next had only begun. There would be setbacks, failures, opponents who never stopped fighting against change. But for this moment, they had peace. They had each other. They had a treaty that represented hope, made tangible, and they had a future worth building. 3 years after the throne glowed, the Luna Coalition had expanded to 12 territories. The school system Alara pioneered had been adopted across all member territories, with standardized education available to every child regardless of background. Worker protections were now enshrined in treaty law. Leadership positions were increasingly earned through merit rather than bloodline alone. It wasn't perfect. There were still territories that refused to join, still people who longed for the old hierarchies, still battles to fight and reforms to implement. But the change was undeniable and, more importantly, sustainable. Alara stood in what had once been the ruins of the Northern Wildlands throne room. It had taken 3 years, but they'd finally rebuilt her mother's territory from the ashes of the Great Purge. The throne room looked different than it had in her mother's memories, more open, more welcoming, with windows that let in natural light and spaces designed for community rather than display of power. "Your mother would be proud," Sienna said, standing beside her. The Northern Wildlands warrior had become Elara's closest advisor, a bridge to her mother's legacy. "This is everything she wanted to build but never had the chance. I wish she could see it," Elara said softly. "Wish she could know her sacrifice wasn't for nothing." "She knows," Sienna's voice was certain. "The moon goddess carries our stories forward. Cassandra sees what you've built, and she's proud." They walked through the rebuilt territory together, observing people starting new lives in the place that had been destroyed a generation earlier. Some were survivors of the original purge, finally returning home. Others were newcomers drawn by opportunity, seeking fresh starts in a territory with no entrenched hierarchies. "We're holding the first Northern Wildlands Council election next month," Alara mentioned. "Positions open to anyone who meets basic qualifications. No bloodline requirements, no wealth minimums, just competence and genuine desire to serve." "That's going to be chaotic," Sienna observed. "Fascinating but chaotic. Probably. But also better than the old system where power was inherited rather than earned." Alara smiled. "Besides, I like chaos. It's where the best changes happen." They reached what would become the new Luna throne, not a replacement for Silvercrest's throne but a sister to it. This one had been carved from the heart of an ancient tree that had survived the territory's destruction, its wood infused with moon magic by Priestess Mara. It represented rebirth rather than unbroken tradition. "Will you sit?" Sienna asked. "See if it recognizes you?" Elara approached the throne cautiously. It was different from Silvercrest's organic where that one was stone, warm where that one was cool. She lowered herself onto the seat, half expecting nothing to happen. The throne blazed with silver-gold light. Not the same light as Silvercrest's throne, this was different, unique to this place and its history. But it was undeniably recognition, undeniably acceptance. The throne acknowledged Alara as Luna not just of Silvercrest, but of the Northern Wildlands. 2 territories, 2 thrones, 1 leader bridging them. "Well," Sienna said, awe clear in her voice. "That's never happened before. Multiple territory recognition by different thrones. You're making history, Luna." "I'm really tired of making history," Alara admitted, though she was smiling. "Can I just govern peacefully for a while?" "Not likely. You're too interesting for peaceful governing." They were interrupted by one of Kieran's messengers, a young woman who approached with the kind of urgency that suggested important news. "Luna Alara." Alpha Kieran sent word. "Ambassador from the Far Eastern Territories has arrived. They're interested in discussing coalition membership." Alara and Sienna exchanged glances. The Far Eastern Territories were distant, traditionally isolationist, and enormously influential. Their joining the coalition would legitimize it in ways nothing else could. "I'll return immediately," Alara said, standing from the Northern Wildlands throne. Its light faded but didn't die completely, a gentle reminder of connection. "Sienna, continue overseeing reconstruction here. I trust your judgment completely." "As you command, my Luna." But Sienna smiled. "Though you hate when I call you that." "I hate the formality of it," Alara corrected. "The title itself I'm still getting used to." 3 years. And it still feels strange. Good. The day it stops feeling strange is the day you've forgotten who you were. Never forget, Elara. The servant girl who sat on the wrong throne is what makes you the right Luna. The meeting with the Far Eastern ambassador was held in Silvercrest's throne room, neutral ground, familiar territory. Elara sat on her throne with Kieran beside her, the picture of unified leadership. The sacred Luna throne glowed steadily, its light a constant testament to her legitimacy. The ambassador was an older man named Hiroshi, with the kind of presence that suggested he'd seen empires rise and fall. He studied Elara with unreadable eyes before speaking. "We've been watching your coalition with interest," he said formally. "The Far Eastern territories don't join alliances lightly. We value our independence highly." "As you should," Elara replied. "The coalition doesn't demand surrender of autonomy. It's about cooperation on shared goals while maintaining individual territory sovereignty. And what are those shared goals? Education for all. Protection of vulnerable populations. Leadership that serves rather than dominates. Defense against threats too large for individual territories to face alone." Elara leaned forward slightly. "But most importantly, proof that territories can thrive without crushing their own people. That power doesn't have to corrupt. That different systems can work together without destroying what makes each unique." Hiroshi was quiet for a long moment. "You're very young to be reshaping how territories function." "I'm exactly old enough," Elara countered. "Because I remember what it's like to be powerless in a system that doesn't care. That memory keeps me honest in ways years of experience might not. And if you're wrong, if this grand experiment fails, then we learn from the failure and try something different. But doing nothing while people suffer isn't an option I can accept." Hiroshi studied her with new intensity. "The rumors are true. You really were a servant before becoming Luna. For 23 years. And you don't try to hide it. Don't pretend you were always destined for this." "Why would I hide it? It's the most important part of my story." Elara met his gaze steadily. "I know what it's like to be invisible. To serve people who look through you like you don't exist. To believe you're worthless because everyone tells you so. That perspective is exactly what makes me effective as Luna. I never forget that leadership exists to serve the led, not the other way around." Something shifted in Hiroshi's expression. "The Far Eastern territories have complications, systems we're not proud of, people we've failed. Every territory does. The question is whether you want to maintain those failures or work to fix them. Fixing them would require admitting we were wrong. That's difficult for proud people. It's difficult for everyone," Elara said gently. "But it's also necessary. The territories that refuse to adapt, that cling to broken systems because they're traditional, they're dying. Slowly, maybe, but inevitably. The world is changing whether they want it to or not." Hiroshi glanced at Kieran. "And you support this? An alpha comfortable with a Luna who challenges everything?" "I support her because she challenges everything," Kieran said firmly. "The old systems were broken. She's building something better. Why would I oppose that?" Another long silence. Then Hiroshi stood and bowed formally, a gesture of respect rarely given to anyone, let alone someone as young as Elara. "The Far Eastern territories will join your coalition," he said. "Not because we're certain you'll succeed, but because we're certain trying is worth the risk. And because you remind us that leadership should be about service." We'd forgotten that. After Hiroshi left to formalize the agreement with his council, Elara slumped on her throne, suddenly exhausted. 13 territories now. The coalition is becoming substantial. "You're building an empire," Kieran observed. "No. I'm building a network. Empires are about domination. This is about cooperation. Semantics. Important semantics." But Elara was smiling. "Though I admit 3 years ago I couldn't have imagined any of this. I thought I'd just try to survive the trials. Maybe make a few small improvements if I somehow lived through it. Now I'm coordinating 13 territories, rebuilding the northern wildlands, and apparently becoming a symbol for systemic change across multiple regions." "How does it feel?" Kieran asked, settling on the throne's armrest in his customary position. "Terrifying. Overwhelming. Like I'm constantly one mistake away from catastrophic failure." Elara looked up at him. "But also right. Like this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, even when I have no idea if I'm doing it correctly. You're doing it perfectly. I'm doing it messily and learning as I go. That's not the same as perfectly. Maybe messy, and learning is perfect for what we're building. Kieran's hand found hers. The old Lunas had everything figured out, every move calculated. And look where that got them, eliminated by people who feared their certainty. But you're transparent about not having all the answers. You admit mistakes. You adjust when things don't work. That makes you harder to fight because you're not defending a fixed position. Alara squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the connection they'd built over 3 years of facing impossible challenges together. Do you ever regret it, choosing me? Your life would be so much simpler if you'd just let the council exile me. My life would be empty, Kieran corrected immediately. Simple isn't the same as meaningful. And you've given my life more meaning than I ever imagined possible. Before Alara could respond, Priestess Mara materialized from the shadows, her usual dramatic entrance that no longer startled anyone. The far eastern territories joining is significant, the old priestess said without preamble. It tips the balance. More territories will follow now that someone of Hiroshi's stature has endorsed the coalition. Is that good? Alara asked. It's inevitable. Which is different than good, but often aligned. Mara approached the throne, her clouded eyes somehow seeing everything. You've done what your mother dreamed, united territories through shared values rather than conquest. But there's still work to do. There's always work to do, Alara said tiredly. Tell me something I don't know. The moon goddess is pleased with you. That made Alara straighten. She is? You surrendered to her during your trials. Became a vessel for her power. But you didn't lose yourself in the process. You integrated that power into who you already were. Mara smiled slightly. That's rare. Most who channel divine power either burn out or become so consumed by it they forget their humanity. You've maintained balance. I don't feel balanced. I feel like I'm constantly scrambling to keep everything from falling apart. That's what balance looks like when you're building something new. It's not calm, it's controlled chaos. Mara moved closer, placing a weathered hand on Alara's shoulder. Your mother would be so proud of you. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you've remained while accomplishing it. Powerful but not cruel. Certain but not inflexible. Leading but not dominating. Tears pricked Alara's eyes. 3 years later, mentions of her mother still hit hard. I wish she could have seen this. The territories cooperating, the northern wildlands rebuilt. Everything she died trying to protect. She sees it. And more importantly, she lives on through you, through your choices, your compassion, your stubborn refusal to accept impossible as an answer. Mara stepped back. I came to tell you something else though. There's a girl in the eastern quarter. 10 years old. Can't shift. Being bullied mercilessly. Her parents asked if you might visit. Alara stood immediately. Of course. When? Now. If you can spare the time. I can always spare time for this. Alara looked at Kieran. Will you? I'll handle the Eastern Ambassador's treaty details. He finished. Go. This is more important. The Eastern Quarter was one of Silvercrest's poorest districts, though poor meant something different now than it had 3 years ago. Alara's reforms had improved conditions dramatically, better housing, job programs, the school, but there was still a long way to go. The girl lived in a modest apartment with her parents, who looked shocked and terrified when their Luna appeared at their door. Alara had learned to put people at ease quickly. I heard your daughter could use someone to talk to, she said gently. May I come in? The parents stammered invitations, ushering her inside. The girl, her name was Lissa, sat in the corner, her eyes red from recent crying. She looked at Alara with a mixture of awe and disbelief. You're really her, Lissa whispered. The Luna who couldn't shift either. I really am. Alara crossed the small room and sat on the floor beside Lissa, making herself less intimidating. And I heard you're having a rough time. The other kids say I'm broken, that I'll never be a real wolf. The words tumbled out, raw and painful. They say even becoming Luna wouldn't fix someone as defective as me. Alara felt the old wounds those words reopened, every insult she'd endured. Every moment of believing she was worthless. But she'd learned something important over 3 years. Her pain had value if she used it to help others. "Can I tell you a secret?" Elara said quietly. Lissa nodded, leaning closer. "I still can't shift normally. Even now, as Luna, my transformation doesn't work the way everyone else's does. I can manifest my Luna form, that celestial warrior thing you've probably heard about, but regular shifting." Lissa's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And you know what I've learned? Being different isn't the same as being broken. You and we're not failing at being normal wolves. We're succeeding at being something else entirely. Something the world hasn't seen enough of to have a name for yet. But everyone said I was worthless too. That I'd never amount to anything, that a servant could never become Luna." Elara smiled. "Everyone was wrong. And everyone saying you're broken is wrong too. You're just becoming something they don't understand yet. What if I never figure out what that something is? Then you figure it out together with other people like us. You're not alone, Lissa. There are dozens of young wolves in this territory who can't shift normally. I'm creating a program specifically for you, training that focuses on your strengths, instead of trying to force you into a mold that doesn't fit." Hope flickered across Lissa's face. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. Because I remember what it felt like to think I was alone, to believe something was fundamentally wrong with me, and I promised myself that if I ever had power, I'd use it to make sure no one else had to feel that way." Lissa threw her arms around Elara, sobbing. Elara held her, letting the girl cry out years of accumulated pain and fear. The parents watched with tears in their own eyes, silently grateful that their daughter had someone who understood. When Lissa finally pulled back, her face was blotchy but lighter. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me help." "And Lissa?" Elara waited, until the girl met her eyes. "The next time someone says you're broken, I want you to remember something. The sacred Luna throne, the most powerful magical artifact in our territory, looked at me, a servant girl who couldn't shift, and said, 'This one. Not the noble daughters with perfect bloodlines. Not the trained warriors. Me. Because being different made me exactly right for what was needed. You think I'm right for something too? I know you are. We just have to figure out what. And we will, together." Walking back to the palace, Elara felt Mara's presence beside her, though the priestess remained invisible to passers-by. "That's why you'll succeed where others failed," Mara's voice whispered. "You never forget the small moments. The individual people. The child who needs to hear she matters." "It's not strategic," Elara admitted. "Visiting one girl doesn't change systemic problems. It changes everything for that one girl. And she'll remember. When she's older, when she has power of her own, she'll remember the Luna who saw her pain and cared. That's how movements build, not through grand gestures, but through small moments of genuine connection multiplied across thousands of people." Elara thought about that as she returned to the throne room. Thought about Thomas and his children now attending school. About Cordelia's daughter finding hope in Elara's story. About every person who'd been told they didn't matter discovering they did. Maybe Mara was right. Maybe the revolution wasn't in the treaties and reforms, though those mattered. Maybe it was in the quiet moments where someone invisible was finally seen. Where someone broken discovered they were actually becoming something extraordinary. 5 years after the throne glowed, the Luna Coalition encompassed 19 territories now. The school system had educated thousands of children who would have been denied access under the old systems. Worker protections had dramatically reduced injuries and fatalities. 3 new Luna bloodlines had emerged, women who'd been told they couldn't lead, discovering the throne recognized them anyway. Elara stood in a grand hall constructed specifically for coalition gatherings, addressing representatives from all member territories. She was 31 now, no longer the frightened servant girl who'd stumbled onto a throne. But she'd kept that girl alive inside her, refusing to forget where she'd come from. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the vast space. I sat on a throne by accident. I was exhausted, my feet hurt, and I made a choice that changed everything. Today, we gather to celebrate not that accidental choice, but all the deliberate ones that followed. She gestured to the assembled representatives. Every territory here chose to join this coalition. Chose reform over comfort. Chose to try building something better even when failure seemed more likely than success. Those choices matter more than any prophecy or divine recognition. We built this together through collective will and stubborn hope. Alpha Cordelia stood. Luna Alara, on behalf of the Western Territory, I want to formally recognize 5 years of unprecedented cooperation and growth. Under your leadership, we've achieved what seemed impossible territories working together, not out of fear or necessity, but genuine shared values. Others stood as well, adding their acknowledgments. Hiroshi spoke of the Far Eastern Territory's transformation. New members described how joining the coalition had improved their citizens' lives. 3 newly recognized Lunas thanked Alara for proving that leadership could look different than tradition demanded. When the formal recognitions ended, and the gathering became more casual, Kieran found Alara on one of the balconies overlooking the city. 5 years, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind in their familiar embrace. From servant to symbol of systemic change. How does it feel? Like I'm still figuring it out, Alara admitted, leaning back against him. Every time I think we've solved one problem, 3 more emerge. But the difference is now we have infrastructure to address them. Systems in place. People trained to help. You've built something sustainable, Kieran observed. That's the real achievement, not just creating change, but ensuring it outlasts you. Alara turned in his arms to face him. Speaking of things that outlast us. She paused, suddenly nervous despite 5 years of partnership. How would you feel about starting a family? Kieran's eyes widened. You want children? I want our children. I want to raise them in the world we've built. Show them that different is strength, teach them that leadership is service. She smiled. Plus, can you imagine how much those kids would rebel against their Luna mother? The chaos would be spectacular. Kieran laughed, pulling her closer. They'd be absolute terrors and I'd love every minute of it. His expression turned serious. Are you sure? Children would make you vulnerable in ways you haven't been. Enemies could use them against you. Enemies could use anything against me. That's always been true. Alara touched his face. But I refuse to let fear of what might happen stop me from living, from building not just a better territory, but a better life. Don't you think we've earned that? We've earned everything, Kieran said softly. Yes. Let's have children. Let's show them the world their mother built from nothing. Let's raise them to be just as stubborn and revolutionary as you are. And just as honorable as you, Alara added. Balance. They stood on the balcony, as the sun set over the coalition they'd built, planning a future that extended beyond politics and reform into something deeply personal. 5 years ago, Alara had fought just to survive the day. Now she was planning for generations to come. The journey from servant to Luna had been brutal and beautiful in equal measure. She'd lost her anonymity, her simple life, her illusions about how the world worked. But she'd gained purpose, love, and the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The throne hadn't made a mistake that day. It had seen something everyone else missed. That the girl who survived being invisible was exactly who the world needed to see. And she was just getting started.